102.5.
It's yet another Saturday, 11th of August 2018, and you are welcome to Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows here. We say it as it is without mincing words, and we speak tough, seeking to bring nothing but the truth and bring in the tangents that are usually left out or lost out in the conversation during the week. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I'll be your moderator between now and 12 midday when we leave here for the sports team to take over and bring you the latest updates from the happenings within the world of sports. I hope your weekend has started well. This week has been one of the most interesting weeks of all the weeks in this year, because we entered this week thinking, pondering, chewing on the new Novation Ameridium which had been presented to Parliament for it to be passed. The issues that have come out, the concerns about the payment of 1.2 billion at the end of 15 years, which Ghanaians were going to be committed to, was not going to lie low, was not going to be allowed to rest, because Ghanaians needed details. Also baffling Ghanaians was the fact that we had been told His Excellency the President had been misled into signing and giving an executive approval for this deal to be sent to Parliament. How was it possible for His Excellency the President to have been misled? Who actually misled His Excellency the President? Those were questions that people were pondering on until we got the news that the Energy Minister, Boakye Ejako, had been relieved of his duties and responsibilities as Energy Minister. Did it come to you as a surprise? Did it come to you as a shock? Many expressed shock, many did not express shock. But still, the question lingered on. Who misled His Excellency the President? Another question that lingers on is, could His Excellency the President have indeed been misled? These are questions still lingering on the minds of people as we speak this morning on the matter of the innovation deal, the American innovation deal that was presented to Parliament. But as we speak, we have heard of His Excellency's intention of withdrawing that deal from Parliament. As much as Parliament has not resumed, do you expect that deal to be withdrawn? Those commitments that we have heard in the media, are those things that are going to hold? Indeed, would we have a situation where this deal would be refined and represented to Parliament for approval? These and many more questions were on the minds of all Ghanaians as we interrogated the new Ameridium, the issues of value for money, the issues of due diligence, the issues about people misleading the President. All of these issues are on the minds of Ghanaians this morning as we speak. We were still chewing on this matter, asking the questions as to who could have misled the President when the news about Bank of Ghana's closure of 5 banks also hit us. We've been deliberating on that matter for quite some time now, and the fine details of the initial 2 banks, UT Bank and Capital Bank, also started coming out. Those fine grains have blown Ghanaians away as we hear of the issues of corruption within these banks, where executives within these banks were using people's savings to transact their own businesses. Entities which were dying and had been given, some lifeline to resuscitate themselves, rather ended up spending these monies. All these are questions and issues that have been on the minds of Ghanaians throughout the entire week. We have still been focusing our attention on the educational sector and the fact that in September we will be starting the new shift system. Many have raised concerns, issues about consultations, issues about funding for the project, issues about logistics for the project. All of these things have been on the minds of Ghanaians. The blueprint for the implementation of this has also been a matter of concern to Ghanaians, with many expressing doubts as to how successful this is going to be. But the President says he is leaving no student who qualifies behind. The double track system has also been on the minds of Ghanaians throughout the entire week. There's lots more that's been on the minds of Ghanaians throughout the entire week. But as a show and as a program, we'll take the time to focus on one or two of these issues and then deliberate on them today on Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. As always, I take the time to take you through the headlines of the newspapers we've gotten this morning and then bring you to our topics we are tabling for discussion today. If you look on the front page of the Daily Guide newspaper, it has on its front page Nana Wu's Otunfo on the front page of the paper with the president exchanging pleasantries with Otunfo 82. Also, NDC power struggle, Victor Smith blasts Beho. He's a biter man. Ashanti bans Mohammed's rivals.
Is it biter or bitter?
He's a bitter, sorry. Bitter. Yes. Bitter. Thank you for the correction. Victor Smith's picture on the front page, Ambassador Victor Beho's picture on the front page, and Navrongo hails new minister on the front page of the paper. Thank you very much, Dr. David Anana, for the correction. Ghanaian Times has on its front page, no show in Tamale as Northern Region MMDC is boycott forum on development of share industries. President pledges to complete CAS maternity block, and Ghana Cote d'Ivoire plot maritime boundary and dispute. Ashanti region records 6,269 teenage pregnancies, all on the front page of the paper. Daily Graphic has on its front page, President pledges to complete CAS maternity block as he starts Ashanti regional tour. On the front page of the paper, issue of folded banks, we won't interfere, AGI says so, and Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire agree on guidelines to plot boundaries. Also, Revenue Authority chases preachers who flaunt wealth, all on the front page of the paper. On the front page of the Spectator newspaper is a picture of Ohima Messi, and it says Ohima Messi's Tahila Experience concert tomorrow. Zenu couple blessed with quadruplets, and check your land title registration. Also, husbands should accompany wives to antenatal clinic, or on the front page of the Spectator newspaper. The topics we are discussing this morning are a thorough look at the president's sacking of the energy minister Boache Jako in the Ameridium, and the media reshuffle of ministers by the president and matters arising. Also, the Bank of Ghana report on the collapsed banks and the call by the Christian Council that directors of these banks should be prosecuted, and matters arising as well. These are the two issues that will dominate the conversation this morning. And to help me do justice to the issues are Mr. Kwesi Pra Jr., Dr. David Percy, lawyer David Annan, Comrade Mutala Ibrahim Mohammed, and Praise Derek Ajay will help me interrogate these issues this morning on Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all shows. As always, this show is live on many affiliates across the country, but you can follow the discussion live on our website, www.radiogold905.com. You can also listen to us if you go to the Google Play Store and search for Radio Gold 90.5. Install that application on your phone and you can listen to us anywhere in the world. Also, go to the TuneIn application and search for Radio Gold 90.5. You can listen to us as well on that show. This show is very interactive. That's to say that your views, your comments, and your thoughts play a very important role in our deliberations. And so we always entreat you to send us those comments, and you can send them coming through this morning using the handle at Samuel Ishen GH. At Samuel Ishen GH. That's for both Twitter and Facebook, and it's all spelled together. Samuel Ishen GH. The Ishen is spelled ESHUN. You look for me on Twitter, you look for me on Facebook, and you start sending your comments through. I will read these comments when they get to me. The show is proudly brought to us by Apollonia City is giving big, and it's almost too good to be true. Get rewarded with cars and loads of amazing home appliances when you buy a home or a plot of land in the Apollonia Mega Dash promo. A 3-bedroom story at the Oxford gets you a brand new Suzuki Baleno from Silver Star, and that Tierra, brand new one. And also, can you get a plot of land and win as well, and get some other appliances as well? You get lots of quality home appliances for simply buying a service plot in Apollonia City. There are no draws and no raffles. Exciting, isn't it? The promo is running from now to the end of September. Everyone wins in Apollonia City's Mega Dash promo. Visit www.apollonia.com.gh/mega- or call 0275 577 577 for more details. You can also send an email to sales@apollonia.com.gh. Kindly do note the terms and conditions apply. The show is also brought to us by TT Brothers. They are the sole distributors of Uncle T Premium Malt and then the Tango Fruit Juice. They have the orange, they have the cherry, they have the apple, and they have the orange as well. On Saturdays like this, when there are lots and lots of occasions out there, you should be using the Uncle T Premium Malt and then the Tango Fruit Juice as well. We'll talk to you more about these entities as we go along. But we'll start the conversation by looking at the firing of Boachi Ejakum and the reshuffle by His Excellency the President just this week. I'll start with you, Comrade Murtala Ibrahim. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to your cherished listeners. Let me also say good morning to my senior comrades here. It's been a long time to sit on a program with lawyer David Annan. I think that it is the right of every government and to reshuffle his government at any point in time. Reshuffles are done by government to see whether there is the need for some adjustment or for some new, if you like, energy and blood being injected in the kind of appointees that His Excellency the President has. So at any point in time, any government can take a decision, and there isn't any time limit within which a reshuffle must be done. A government can decide to have a reshuffle 1 month after appointment. Of course, that may sound and seem bizarre if a government does that. But my understanding of reshuffles are that if government thinks that certain people were given the opportunity to man certain ministries or, if you like, agencies or institutions, the president may consider what they do there not to be in his best interest one, or he may also think that they did so well, and for which reason he would want to put them in other ministries to see whether what they demonstrated and the ministries they were assigned to or institutions they were assigned to, they can inject same in the new portfolios that will be given to them. Also, during reshuffle, some may be shown the exit. If the president thinks that you are not somebody who would indeed work towards the achievement of his vision, he may want to show you the exit. Let me also say that reshuffles also do not necessarily mean that when the president asks you to go, it means that you couldn't perform. He may want to give other people the opportunity to see how best they can. But the thinking of people, and which is rational, is that if a minister is doing very well in a particular ministry, it wouldn't make sense the president firing the ministry. Of course, in politics, a lot of things happen. Appointments are done, one, probably based on competence, and some instances they may base on either friendship. But this government has taken it to another level. It is obvious that the kinds of appointments that he did were based on very outrageous reasons, because you have a government that accused the NDC and particularly President Mahama of running family and friends government, when in fact there was only one family member who had an opportunity to serve in his government in the capacity of a deputy minister. Now, there's very people who accused the NDC without any buckets of evidence that we ran a family and friends government, came and they have taken it to a level that is unprecedented. I'm yet to be told any African country or any country in the world where you have a government which will pack family, friends, and in fact girlfriends, the extent to which this president has done. You can count not less than 15 direct family members of His Excellency the President serving in his government. He has appointed his cousins, he has appointed his nephews. As a matter of fact, he has appointed his baby mama. And I say a baby mama because a woman with whom he has a child at the time when they were not married, such a woman is also serving in his government. As if that was enough, you had the vice president's, father-in-law and brother-in-law who have all found spaces to work in this government. Now, when you raise these issues, then you find those hypocrites who are masquerading as, if you like, leaders of civil society group, or if you like, journalists who would come tell you that, you see, appointment should be based on competence. And I do not think that those people ever doubted the competence of Joyce Bauer. I don't think that they ever doubted that, because this was a young woman who had indeed accomplished herself and a lot of careers, a trained lawyer of long-standing practice, and somebody who had worked in the public service for a very long time. Only her, and such a woman to be appointed as a deputy minister, yet they pushed down the throat of the people of this country that President Mahama was running family, friends, government. And it's interesting that you even know that among those who were appointed as ministers from his home region, only one member was from his tribe. And for me, that is the level of decent governance that we experience. You can't talk about this without even looking at under Prof. Mills. How many of his family members served in his government? Virtually none. If you look at former President Rawlings, how many of his family members served in his government? Virtually none. So you had the demonstration of this. But the MPP, particularly under this government, has taken the appointment of ministers, heads of institutions to another level. So that notwithstanding, the president has the right to do a reshuffle. But I don't think that the reshuffle, came at a time when people expected it. As a matter of fact, people were expecting the reshuffle to be done a year after the presidency of this government. However, there isn't any time bound. But we also need to insulate the sacking of the Minister for Energy from this whole gamut of reshuffle. You have a Minister of Energy who indeed was dismissed, and before he was dismissed, there were a lot of stories that was out there, the circumstances surrounding the dismissal. However, we have been provided with a lot of information. And by the way, the president having appointed 110 ministers, which was a record appointment of ministers as far as I'm concerned in this world, I think that, or at least in Africa, he doubled down. He didn't only even reduce or maintain it, he increased it. And he increased it by appointing someone to an office or a portfolio that I am yet to head of, apart from now, Minister of State in the office of the Vice President. It is very clear to everybody that the president doesn't want Honorable Boniface in his government. It's very clear. And if I were him, I would humbly indeed rescind the appointment. And if I were him, I wouldn't take it. Again, we know what had happened to that ministry. I took particular interest in that ministry because I'm a Zongo boy. So if the president appointed a minister in charge of Zongo and inner city development, and not a dime was given to that ministry, the ministry, even though had a budget line, not a dime was released to the ministry. You have the minister who traveled around the country, every single Zongo community in this country, the minister traveled to. Honorable Boniface went and made lofty promises, and those promises were made based on the more lofty promises that were made by His Excellency the President. And I shudder to think that some assurances were also given, for which reason Honorable Boniface went round and made those promises. Yet nothing was given to the man. How do you expect the man to deliver? Now you have sent the man to an office that he is not just going to do anything. He is just going to sit there as a minister of state in the office of the vice president. For me, it is extremely demoting. And they've sent again Honorable Mustafa Hamid to a ministry where no dime has been given, for me to make him more unpopular. I have read a piece written by an NPP activist in Germany who wondered why the president could do that to Dr. Mustafa Hamid. Mustafa Hamid can come and pretend to be all right with it, but some of us do know that he's a very bitter person now. We do know. So he can come out publicly and say that, he's all right with it. By the way, he moved him there and promoted his deputy. Now, someone will say that, of course, Ministry of Zongo and Inner City Development is equally a ministry as compared to Ministry of Information. Now, if you send him there and there isn't anything for him to operate with, you are sending him there to virtually kill his political career. And then you move his deputy as the substantive minister. For me, it is the clearest indication that you felt that the minister was not doing very well, and therefore you think that his deputy minister can do well. By the way, a deputy minister who I remember when myself and Felix were appointed as two deputy ministers, they sat on a radio station and said that the Minister of Information didn't need more than one deputy. Interestingly, he became one of three deputies at a particular ministry. Now, I think that if you look at all this reshuffle that is done, you would come to one conclusion, that there are some people the president want to show the exit, but he did not have the courage to show them the exit. Once again, the concerns that were expressed by having an outrageous 110 needless ministers, the president had indicated as if they were going to prune down the number of ministers. I think that if we had this in mind, then we may be looking at it as a fainting, if you like, view. Because if the president wanted to prune down the number of ministers, I don't think that he would have been increasing the number of ministers as is being done. Because now, Honorable Boniface will go to a new ministry. It ought to be a ministry setup which would have, if you like, secretaries and others who will be working in that ministry, more burden on the already depleted government coffers. More burden on already, ramshackled purse, which the president promised to protect. It is also very clear that there is an agenda by this government. And frankly speaking, I see the handiwork of Gabi Ochildaku in the kind of appointments that have been done. Honorable, Ajaku, it is very clear that you don't expect only one minister to be responsible in the mess that is with us. And I say this because you have an agreement that has financial implication, an agreement that has, in fact, security implication, an agreement that has legal implication, an agreement that has moral and social implication. For such an agreement to be done by a government in which it has gone bad. So I call this thievery gone bad. It is very clear that this government and his appointees were on the path of robbing the state. But for the resilience of the Ghanaian people and the stiffer opposition, this robbery, this daylight robbery received, this agreement would have gone through. And interestingly, the deputy minister who spiritedly defended this agreement is being promoted as the Minister for Information. This thing was defended by every single communicator of this government. As a matter of fact, ministers and deputy ministers who represent this government on media platforms, either radio and TV, all defended this renegotiated Ameri deal. They all defended it. There wasn't a single minister or deputy minister who did not defend this deal. As a matter of fact, on what basis was the deputy minister and minister for information defending this and communicating same to the Ghanaian people? I have worked at the Ministry of Information as a deputy minister before, and I have worked close to government before. And I do know that for a Ministry of Information to communicate a particular issue to the Ghanaian people, they would have been convinced beyond any doubt that that was the true position of the government. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Communication is the mouthpiece of the government and by extension, the president. No, so if the Minister of Information and his deputy were seen defending this agreement, no one can tell me that President Nana Addo was not convinced in the heart of his heart that this was an agreement he agreed with. So he wasn't misled. Now, assuming without admitting that His Excellency the President was misled, then God save this country. If that is the case, then I'm wondering the kind of government we are running. Sean, I had the privileged opportunity to have represented my minister at cabinet on several occasions. And I do appreciate how cabinet work is done. And I can tell you that even issues that are not so grievous as this and so important as this, documents would have been presented. Is it the case that this thing was not brought to cabinet? My answer to this is that yes, it may be the case. Because if it was, why is it that there wasn't any cabinet approval? It took an executive approval. And this letter was signed. This executive approval, the letter was done by no less a person than the nephew of the president. That is Mr. Nana Asenti Bediotu. By the way, he wrote that plagiarized speech. So the president can never sack him. He did it. As a matter of fact, we do know for a fact that he was one of those who wrote the plagiarized speech. But the president didn't sack him. Now, if indeed Ajako brought the issue to cabinet, I don't think that they would have been talking about this issue. Now, what kind of letter was Mr. Asante Bidiotu writing? Did he read? Did he understand the document? Did he understand the agreement on which basis he indeed drafted the executive approval? And did the president understand the kind of approval that he was given? No one can tell me that the president didn't have an appreciation of a document for which he was given an executive approval. No one can tell me that. If that is the case, then that is extremely worrying. But you see, some have also said that that is possible, that the president might not have understood the executive approval he was given. And people make references to when he was the Minister for Justice and Attorney General. You remember the read when he said Chachu against the president. He wrote that. And this is a lawyer, and I believe that his entire practice is older than my entire age. This is a lawyer we are made to understand that, oh, he makes no mistakes. He is the best legal brain that this country has ever produced. Now, you remember when that particular thing was done, and people pointed out to him, the defense they had was that, no, he didn't write it, he only signed. You remember? That was the defense, that he didn't write. And the question we asked at that time, I remember, was that, oh, if he didn't write it, he only signed, then he didn't read. Or is it a case that he read and never understood? I don't think that it was a case of which he read and never understood. Perhaps if he read and didn't understand, or he didn't write, then he was in a different state of mind. And for which reason he could sign such a document without appreciating it. So some who have argued that, yes, the president, is possible that he was misled based on what happened when he was the Minister for Justice and Attorney General. As if that was enough. You remember the letter appointing the gentleman to the Lands Commission. They made reference to a repealed law, and that was repealed several years ago. You remember when the president also came and talked about the PURC, when he came and was indeed imposing tariffs and determined the percentage of tariff adjustment that was supposed to be given to certain, artisans, tailors and hairdressers. When the president, who is a lawyer of long-standing repute, the creme de la creme of all lawyers in this country, who ought to have known that the only body that was clothed with the authority to determine tariff adjustment was the PURC, in consultation with the various stakeholders. Of course, the president or the government also being a stakeholder. When the president knew at the very time he was making those pronouncements that the PURC had just written to those various institutions to, make their input towards the possible readjustment of tariffs, the president went ahead and declared those tariffs adjustment. Sean, you remember the pronouncement the president made on the monies that they were saving this country as a result of expunging ghost names from the Controller and Accountant General. The president didn't only give figure. As a matter of fact, he stated emphatically an amount of money that this country was going to be saved. But for that intervention, that we would have lost several hundreds of thousands of Ghana cedis, if not millions, only for the Ministry of Finance to come out subsequently to apologize for that wrong information. So how more can they mislead this president? Assuming the president attended an international program and for which there is going to be a treaty. Now, the president, per our foreign policy understanding, a common statement made by a president can represent a foreign policy position of this country. So assuming that the president traveled, to a UN General Assembly or attended an international program, and they says that there is an agreement that is going to be entered between government of Ghana and perhaps, if you like, in Afghanistan or another country that is unfriendly to positions that are taken by Ghana or the sub-regional body or even the continental body of Africa, and the president makes a statement, it becomes a foreign policy position. Now, if that statement is made and later we are told that the president was misled, then what kind of country are we going to be running? What I do know is that once a document is brought to cabinet, it ceases to be a document owned by the ministry that has submitted that document to cabinet. Because when you are discussing issues such as this at cabinet, every single rep, every single minister who is present will be given a copy. As a matter of fact, before even cabinet meetings, documents that cabinet is going to look at would have been sent to the ministry sometimes 1 week before the cabinet sitting. The question is, was this document sent to specific ministers? If it was, then it ceases to be the advice only of the Minister for Energy. The question then is, you have other ministers, and I listened to the IES, the International, is it International Energy Security something? Institute for Energy and Security. Now, if you listen to IEA, thank God that IEA seemed to be moving away from being a political wing of the NPP, because that is what I have always recognized the IEA to be. Perhaps they want to turn a new leaf. I listened to their spokesperson, a brother of mine, McDad, who said that the three deputies ought to go, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Energy, who were all part and parcel of this negotiation. The rep of the VRE, by the way, the senior members of VRE have distanced themselves from the decision that was arrived at. So who represented them? What was the position of the VRE at the time? The people at Ministry of Finance. And we have been told that the Ministry of Finance was not. That is baloney. That is absolutely not true. Now, if you have a serious government, a government of a sort, a government that seeks the welfare of the people of this country, then all these demands that are made by this new metamorphosized, if you like, IEA, which I think that we can see whether we can give them the benefit of the doubt, and then you have the IES and other, if you like, institutions that are endowed with the capacity to look at such, energy issues, have all demanded that the sacking should go further. And it is not only sacking those people, they should be prosecuted. They should be prosecuted. The impression is created as if that you only prosecute people when crime is committed, even the intent to commit crime. And I believe that we would have lost money in these travels and negotiations. The other issue has to do with what was the principal position of this government. The position of the NPP as a political party in opposition was that, hey, what was smelling? The Ameri was stinky. The Ameri was something that was completely unacceptable, and that this was a gargantuan fraud that was pushed down the throat of the people of this country. When they were given the opportunity, they sent a team led by the lawyer of His Excellency, the President. And in their report, they indicated that Ameri was the best thing that had ever happened to the people of this country. More than 360 degrees turnaround. You have the Minister for Justice and Attorney General who wrote an opinion and advice on the possible intention of abrogating this contract and warned government and the Ministry of Energy not to dare attempt to do such a thing. Today, people are telling us that we should talk about Ameri. And if you listen to those incompetent and corrupt government communicators, the line of the narrative has changed. They are now saying that, yes, let's talk about Ameri. Go back and talk about the Ameri which you condemned. And we make references to the position subsequently you have taken after you got the opportunity to rule this country through deceit, through lies. Now, tell us the position. The issue at stake is the renegotiated Ameri deal. How can we enter into an agreement that we are providing energy for this country, and at a time when we needed this energy, we are left with 2.5 years, we have an amount of money to pay. We can sit with the people, have a negotiation, and find out how we can make those payments. Now you have a government that decides that, no, we want to get another company who knows the relationship that exists between people close to this government and the another company that is being brought to manage the same thing for another 15 years. We were to pay about $255 million or so to this company. Now you are going to another negotiation in which you will be paying $1.3 billion. And you tell us that the Minister of Finance was not involved. You tell us the Minister of Justice and Attorney General was not involved, when you knew too well that this agreement has financial implication. So if it has financial implication, what decent-minded government do is that they want what they call value for money. What would be the consequences of this renegotiation on our economy? They would have done that. It has legal implication. And you can't sign an agreement without legal conditions attached to it. What did the Minister for Justice and Attorney General do? Was the ministry involved? No one can tell me that the ministry was not involved. And it's insulting to the Ghanaian people to begin pretending that this was just something that was done single-handedly by an individual. Now, even if you didn't want to give respect to the legal implications and consequences and the financial implications, what about the moral and social responsibility as a government? Couldn't you even have discussed this with other senior members in your government? Couldn't you have even asked yourself that how much do we need to do ABCD, and what will be the effects in the provision of our most ramshackle and haphazard implemented free SHS, for which reason you are now going to be running, what's the name, double track, triple track, and other track system, and which government himself has stated that our inability to have these people go on one stream is because we are not able to provide the needed structure. The reason why we are indeed implementing an untested, unimplemented program using Ghanaian kids as guinea pigs rather than our own kids is because we do not have money. Yet, you see nothing wrong doling out this amount of money, $1.3 billion, to a private entity who knows what relationship that exists. There have been also stories and allegations of the involvement of the president, Brother Bomti, in this arrangement. There have been pictures that have been paraded on social media, and the defense that was given by Gabi and co was that this was a meeting that they had before the elections with Ameri. What business? And were we told that Bomti and Gabi and co were energy experts, and for which reason they represented the MPP as a political party and the government at the time in such negotiations? I am told that the arrangement with Car Power is worse. The arrangement with Car Power is worse. Look, you have a Minister of Finance who went into a fraudulent bond. As we see today, nobody knows who bought 5% of that bond. Nobody knows. When he was called before Parliament, he appeared condescending, so insulting and absolutely arrogant to the people of this country. And that is the posture that is being demonstrated. Now, assuming that this is the whole truth, you have the Minister of Energy, the former minister, because he's now former, who himself has posted on his Facebook wall that when the dust is settled, his side of the story will be told. So it's clear that the story that we have been told is not the full story. If that is the full story, what will be the interest or the business of the minister in telling the people of this country that his side of the story will be told? To be very honest with you, Ishon, what we are experiencing in this government and the actions that are taken by this government on this issue is the clearest demonstration, and I feel so sad, is the clearest demonstration of credibility, collapse of credibility of the political elite. An elite in which, sadly, as a young person, I am part. And the president's action is the demonstration of the collapse of the credibility. Listen to people in trotros, listen to people on radio who care less about what kind of politics we do in this country. They begin to distrust politicians. They begin to come to the conclusion that all politicians are the same. I want to tell those people that they have an opportunity to indeed restore the dignity of politics in this country, the dignity of governance in this country, by booting out and voting out this super incompetent and super corrupt government in 2020. But I'm wondering whether people have the patience to wait till 2020 if this president wouldn't do the most honorable thing. Perhaps he should just resign.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ibrahim Mohammed, still here with us on your power station, Radio Gold 90.5 FM. We have 20 more minutes before we hit the top of the hour, 10. If you just join us, you are welcome to Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. Your thoughts are welcome on Twitter and Facebook. Please look for the handle at Samuel Asian GH and start sending your tweets and your Facebook comments through. I will read them. I am to lawyer David Annan. Lawyer, good morning.
Yeah, morning. Morning to Kwesi and to Murtala and to Prince. This topic, I'm quite sure, is going to be exhaustively discussed by Kwesi, and it has already been well dealt with by Murtala. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'd like to, after making prelim comments about this thing, look at the judgment debt, 160 million, that has been slapped on the University of Ghana, because it's something that some people got to look at. It's the University of Ghana, as you know, is a public institution, and therefore its liabilities would have to be carried by the taxpayer and by the government. They certainly don't have 160 million to pay. But with regard to this merry business, let's situate the facts as we know them to be. Now, they're operating a 300 megawatt emergency power plant in Ghana. Now, this was brought by President Mahama in order to alleviate the power crisis a few years ago. And by the terms of that agreement, we were going to pay 510 million. After 5 years, we would own that facility. Now, the MPP raised hell and brimstone about the provisions of the agreement, and they said they would revise it when they did come to power. In fact, even abrogate it. Now, they attempted to do so. They set up a 17-man committee, as Mutala was suggesting, led by the president's lawyer, Mr. Philip Addison, lawyer Philip Addison. And at the end of the day, the report was seen and addressed by the Attorney General, who issued a clean bill of health and said that there was nothing wrong with the Ameri deal. So if that is the case, we wonder why they needed to renegotiate it. And I've always been saying that the problem we have in Africa, Sami, is that our leaders and the elite, I blame the educated elite in this country for practically 90% of the woes that we're having. And when we talk about the banking sector, I'd also have to divert a little and go into a little pet topic of mine when we're discussing that. You see, you've got lawyers, you've got directors, you've got technical staff, you've got members of parliament, you've got PhDs who draw up contracts which anyone can see are constructed against the interests of the nation. For example, this army contract, this basis, the U.S. basis contract that was. You know, one person very close to the American embassy was laughing and telling me that it was not even the State Department who drafted that contract. It was not the Office of the Attorney General in the United States who drafted that contract. It was the army lawyers. Sami, the lawyers from the army, and they were laughing all the way to the bank. They said, yeah, we got a rollover. And it is true. We had on our side the Ministry of Defense and the Attorney General's Department. Yet they only had the legal department of the armed forces of the United States. And look at what they produced. Totally. And this issue about drawing up contracts, which are not in our interest, relates to where disputes will be resolved if there's an issue arising out of the contract. Most of the time, you find that the arena, the locus contractors, is not so much taken into account as the lex loci. That is the area or the land where the contract or part of the contract was made. Now, if you're looking at the lex loci, why isn't it in Ghana? But you find in these contracts a provision that the jurisdiction where any dispute should be settled should be in England, or should be in Switzerland, or even at times in the United States. Rarely do we have our people standing up for the fact that once it is a contract between the nation, Ghana, and a third party, at the very least, the parties should have the ability to access the courts or the local jurisdictional system in this country. Even if you say that there's a choice, you can either go abroad or do it here. Most of the time, doing it here is excluded. So you find that you end up with a deal like the Ameri deal. Now, if this thing had gone for dispute resolution, I wonder what they had stated or where they had stated the lex loci to be. Was it going to be in Ghana or was it going to be in a foreign country? Now you take this UG deal. The UG itself, with the whole Department of Law there, I don't know if they were consulted, had it in the agreement that the area of dispute would be, for dispute resolution would be in England. And then, of course, you have our serial contract abrogators, MPP, coming into form. Now, whenever these people come to power, I don't know what it is, Sami, about them that they have to abrogate contracts. And so, the University of Ghana contract, which was signed with a third party in order to build hostel facilities costing $64 million US, Africa Integras. Now, that's 1,000-bed new hostel facility for undergrads. And it was supposed to operate as a 25-year build, operate, and transfer, what we call BOTS, build, operate, and transfer contract. At the end of it, then, and it was structured such that we would pay periodically, that is the University of Ghana, and they would have taken or achieved those repayment schedules from the various rents that the occupants of the building would have. Now, MPP come into power, there's a new rector of the university, and then he says that no, there's something wrong with the deal, and therefore they're going to renegotiate it. The problem is the basis upon which you're doing the renegotiation. They claim, that's the University of Ghana, said that they had not followed the proper contractual procedures in arriving at the contract and internal rules and regulations that the university had. You have a problem there when you go on that tack. First of all, the previous vice-chancellor is going to fight you because he's not going to sit down, that's Professor Aite, and have his contract or his agreement impugned on the basis that he did not follow due process. Therefore, I would not be surprised if even in this case, where the arbitration was done in London, I wouldn't be surprised if the third party, that is Africa Integras, decided to get an affidavit or a sworn statement from Professor Aite stating the opposite. Once that happens, that's the end of your case. Because Ghana is saying A, they're able to get a witness from Ghana who says B, which the same B is in accordance with what Africa Integras, who we are fighting, is saying. That means that you've got a witness from your side who is saying something adverse to your point of view, to your position. The law construes that once that, and that witness is no mean a person, or would be no mean a person than former and current, I don't want to say vice chancellor, because I don't know if he actually did, though I suspect that he did. You know, I can't put my foot on it and say categorically that he did proffer an opinion, but I would expect that to be something that would be done by Africa Integras. And you know, to invite that thing. So straight away you're going to lose. Now, what do we end up with? A 160 billion default penalty that is slapped on us. 160. You come back to Ameri, the same thing happens. They renegotiate. Initially, we have to pay 510. They say that they've gotten a new company, Miscellaneous, who would then pay off Ameri with an amount of 52 million and some spare change, and then the government of Ghana would top up with 39, and then the Ameri would wash it. Why would Ameri decide to take roughly about 91 million when they are being owed about 300 outstanding? Why would they do that? What made you think? And then the issue is that Ameri agreed. I would be surprised if their shareholders and their management would consent to taking 91 million in lieu of over 300 million. That is outstanding. And why would, as Mutala and doubtless Kwesi Pratt & Co. would say, why would this company agree to that's the miscellaneous, take a 25-year extended period, and then without it being in their interest. And therefore, you look at the payments that they were due to get, about 71 a year. You compute that over the 25-year period, and it comes to what we call the 1.12 billion. You see, why would they take that unless it was advantageous for them? Why, conversely, would the government of Ghana not take the extra 2 years, wait and get the company as its own, and then renegotiate or find a third party who would be willing to take the clean company, which would have been absolved of any debt, and then run it. If the government thinks that we cannot run a merry, fine, wait the 2 years, pay off the 300 million, get it as your own, and then sell it. It's like buying a player who has 6 months to go on his contract for 100 million, when you can buy him after 6 months for nothing, when he's on a free contract. That's the equivalency. So in a lot of ways it didn't make sense. But let me end it here, Sammy, so that I can have enough time to discuss the banking issue and other matters arising. And before I just wrap up, Sammy, let me remind our people, why is the NDC leaving this matter of the electoral commissioner to die? We are not hearing anything about the fresh appointment. It's all gone dead silent. We are talking about Mary, the sacking of ministers. We're talking about the banking sector. We said we were not going to work with the MPP's newly appointed electoral commissioner. What is happening to that issue? We were supposed to go on demonstration. We were supposed to take certain actions to show our repugnance at what had happened. Everything has gone quiet. And Sammy, I fear that once the rank and file of the hierarchy are now involved in a struggle for positions, and they are going to start having to campaign to either retain or acquire seats, the emphasis and the direction and the concentration of minds on tackling this fraudulent appointment will be dissipated. Already we're not hearing anything about this. I mean, so let me remind our top guys in the NDC and the other political parties, don't let this issue go.
Thank you, Dr. Lawyer David Annan, for your submission this morning here on Alhaji and Alhaji. I'll come straight to you, Mr. Pat.
Well, the first point to make is that I'm not in a hurry. I am not in a hurry to come to any firm conclusions about the removal of Mr. Boakye Ejiakor from office. And I'm not in a hurry to do that because there's so many unanswered questions. It is the provision of these answers which will enable me and many other Ghanaians to come to firm conclusions about his removal. As we sit in this studio, I haven't seen anything from official sources which confirms that the Ameri deal is about to be withdrawn from Parliament or has been withdrawn. About 8 days ago, depending on newspaper reports and so on, I made the point that the Ameri deal had been withdrawn. And I was so vigorously challenged by a leader of the New Patriotic Party. I then indicated that I'd found my information from the Statesman and from Mr. Asare Ochodaku. And this leader of the New Patriotic Party, indeed, the General Secretary of the party, insisted that Gabi Ochodaku and the Statesman do not speak for government. So on what basis can I conclude that the Ameri deal has indeed been withdrawn from Parliament? On what basis? There's no basis for me to come to that conclusion. And if the Ameri deal has not been withdrawn from Parliament, and reasons for the removal of Boakye Agyarko have not been stated, how can I link the two? It is impossible to link the two. So questions need to be answered. Has the Ameri deal been withdrawn or not? Was Mr. Boakye Agyarko sacked because of the Ameri deal? And indeed, if he was sacked because of the Ameri deal, why? Where is the evidence? And so on. I don't know. You understand? Now, I think we ought to be very thorough in this country. We've been glib, we've been flippant on important issues, and it is not good for the health of our country. You see, initially, government announced that they have set up a committee to renegotiate the Ameri deal. This committee flew to Dubai, and there were all kinds of stories about how the committee's work was funded, how they were giving monies to do shopping and so on. As we speak, I haven't seen the report of that committee. Where is the report of that committee? What did the committee say? Maybe, and it is possible, that it is that committee which recommended the so-called renewed agreement, the new agreement and so on. Maybe it is not. I don't know. So on what basis can I be making comments about the renegotiated Ameri deal? What is there for me to know and so on? You know, there's something also which is very interesting. I recall that a 7-member committee was also set up, which had representation from the Ministry of Energy, the Volta River Authority, and so on. That committee, what work did it do? Where is the outcome of that committee's report? What happened? That committee even had a representative of the Attorney General on it. So where is that committee report? And if I don't know what that committee recommended, how can I justify or kick against the dismissal of Boakye Agyarko? That is not all. The official spokesperson of the Ministry of Energy has stated that nobody can hold Mr. Boakye Agyarko responsible for what happened, and that the emails are available. What emails are those? What do those emails say? Who wrote those emails? And what was the official reaction to the emails when those emails were written and dispatched? I don't know. You understand? Mr. Boakye Agyarko himself has stated publicly that when the dust settles, we will hear his side of the story. Now, if he has a side of the story which is different from the side of the story which is being told, what is the difference? What is the difference between the official narrative and his narrative? Does anybody know? I don't know. I will not pretend to know. You understand? So that's another question we need to answer. Now, we have been told by Mr. Gabi Asare Ochedaku that yes, he actually was in photographs with leaders of Ameri, together with other persons and so on. That these photographs were taken before the December 7th, 2016 elections. And that they were taken when Ameri wanted to meet with the current president when he was opposition leader. And that these photographs are not current. And these photographs cannot be proof of his involvement and the involvement of the president's brother in the Ameri deal. How am I to verify this story? How am I to verify this story? In any case, why did Ameri want to meet with the opposition leader at the time? I don't know. We don't know. Did Ameri finally manage to meet with the opposition leader after Gabi and the president's brother had cleared them? Were they not able to meet the opposition leader at the time after Gabi and the opposition leader's brother denied them access? We don't know all of these. And all of these are very important questions. In any case, what was the level of discussion between Gabi, the president's brother, and others, and Ameri? What did they discuss? And how is that germane or not germane to the current impasse? We don't know. I don't know. You understand? Now, all of us also know, or at least those who have some experience working in the public services know, that executive approval is given in situations of emergency. You understand? If cabinet is meeting regularly, that is once a week. Cabinet may meet more than once a week. If there is something so urgent which cannot wait for 1 week, then the president may give executive approval. In this case, executive approval was given. The letter which was sent to Parliament, which was signed by the executive secretary to the president, indicated that executive approval had been given. Now, if it is true that the executive secretary acted on behalf of the president, then the question to ask is, what convinced the president that this matter was an emergency? Who convinced the president that this matter was an emergency that needed his signature? Now, if on the other hand, the president had not given approval that the matter should be sent to Parliament, based on executive approval, who lied to Parliament? Who told Parliament that the president had approved the deal? I don't know. If somebody knows, we should be helped. You understand? Was an executive approval given? Was an executive approval not given? In either case, there are so many questions which have to be answered. Now, last week, I was reading one of these newspapers. I think I was reading one of the state-owned newspapers. And the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Energy stated emphatically that the views of the Attorney General were not sought in this matter, and that the Minister of Finance did not approve the deal or was not consulted. This is chairman of the Parliamentary Committee of Energy, an MPP member of Parliament, who sat in the discussions of this issue. Was he lying to us? Did he tell us the truth? Now, this generated some substantial controversy. This week, I've seen another statement from a leading member of the New Patriotic Party claiming that the Attorney General was consulted and that her opinion was sought, and that the Minister of Finance's opinion was also sought. So what is happening? Who is telling us the truth? Is it true that the Attorney General's opinion was sought and the Minister of Finance's opinion was sought? Now, if it is true that the opinions were sought, how come that the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee of Energy says something else? What does he know? What doesn't he know? I'm totally confused. And I think anybody who is looking at this development must be totally confused. Understand? So there are hundreds of questions needing answers and so on. Now, for me, it is significant to note that this controversy over the Ameri deal is at least 3 to 4 years old. 3 to 4 years old. When the New Patriotic Party was in opposition, it was commenting loudly on their merry deal. You understand? In government, it had contributed significantly to their merry deal and so on. What were those comments concretely based on? It's not a new thing. It didn't fall from the skies yesterday. So people like the president, people like the energy minister and so on, must be seized with certain facts. They must have based their criticism on a set of facts and so on. What are those facts? The little we know, I listened to His Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, current Vice President, when he was in opposition. And indeed, only last week, I played the tape again. And he was livid with anger. And he said, look, this unmarried deal stinks of corruption. And says the plant could be bought from General Electric for $200 million. He was emphatic that General Electric was selling a similar plant for $200 million. And he could not understand why the plant was sold at the time for $350 million. Now, he argued very, very strongly, even when he had been told that buying something on high purchase, the cost would be different from buying it outright and so on. He still continued to argue. Now, my question is, if the Vice President knows where to buy this plant for $200 million, why do we enter into an arrangement which puts the cost in excess of $1 billion? It is not that they don't know. The Vice President says he knows. He knows where to buy this for $200 million. If he didn't know, that would be a totally different story. But he knows. So how come? I don't know. Now look, even me, and I mean even me, just a simple, ordinary journalist trying to ply my trade and so on, even me, I know that machines have lifespans. Machines, they have lifespans. The more you use them, the more they deteriorate. So if you buy a machine on high purchase, and you can become the proud owner of the machine in 5 years, the same machine, if you buy it and you become the proud owner in 15 years, you might be buying scrap. So what are the things that went into this 15-year arrangement? What is the engineer's report? What did the engineer's report say? What did the professionals say about the quality of the plant in 15 years' time? Were engineers given the task of doing this evaluation? Were they not given the task of doing this evaluation? I don't know. And it makes it exceedingly difficult for me to rush to conclusions in this matter. You know something? Whatever happens, some of these questions will be answered in future. At least we have the promise of the departing Minister of Energy that when the dust settles, his side of the story will be told. I pray that the dust settles as quickly as possible so that we can have the benefit of his side of the story. We also have the promise from that young man who is the minister's spokesman that the emails will be made available. I don't normally pray, and when I've prayed, I've not been too sure of the efficacy of my prayers, but I will pray. I will pray that at the appropriate time, these emails are made available. And when all these questions have been answered, or some of the critical questions have been answered, we will be in a position to take a firm position on the dismissal of the minister. Be that as it may, even as it is impossible to take a firm position on the dismissal of the minister, it is clear that this new and merry deal is far, far worse than the deal which was criticized by the New Patriotic Party in opposition. That we can conclude on. If you look at the so-called New Deal, my goodness, it makes those who signed the old deal look like angels from heaven. But then the other side of the story has to do with the issue of the reshuffle of ministers. And I'd like to relate my own experiences, a few of them, to bring the matter into sharp relief. Some years ago, I was traveling to La Côte d'Ivoire. And I happened to have been on the same aircraft with a minister and 2 aides. And we got into a conversation. And the minister said he was going for an international conference. So I asked him, what is the conference about? Innocently, I asked him, what is the conference about? He said, oh, when his chief director arrives, he would know the topic for discussion. I mean, I was so shocked. He was already on the aircraft going for the conference and didn't know what the conference was about. My goodness, these are the people we have designated as ministers and given so much power and so on. That's number one experience. The other experience was that I happened to have been in a certain country, doing my own thing and so on. I come down into the hotel lobby and I see a minister, with all the assistants and so on being treated like God and so on, protocol and so on. I said, my friend, what's happening? He says, oh, I'm here for a conference and to have some discussions and so on. He said, but what are you doing? And I told him what I was doing. He said, oh, I'm going for this meeting and you can accompany me. I will introduce you as a journalist and so on. So I said, fine. So I joined this minister. On the other side was a professor of many years' experience. The other minister was a professor of many years' experience. And when he spoke, there was no doubt that he was an authority on his subject and so on. And then it was time for the Ghanaian minister to speak. And I'm telling you a true story. The Ghanaian minister pulled out a sheet of papers. The other minister has spoken without notes. The Ghanaian minister pulled a sheet of papers. Unfortunately for him, the pages had been messed up. And then I saw the minister's hands shaking, completely shaking. He had lost control. He was not coherent. It was a near disaster. But he was smart. The minister then somehow just turned to me and introduced me as one of the leading journalists in Ghana. And that he was inviting me to brief them about the subject. I'm telling you, it happened. Off air, I'll mention the country. Off air, if you like, I'll give you the details. I've never been this embarrassed in my life. You understand? And I'm sure there will be many others. These are years ago. Only recently, I happened to have been at a function at the State House. And a minister was introduced with all the pomp and everything. And quickly somebody handed this minister a speech to be read on behalf of the president. As for the handshaking, sometimes it's normal. What? Handshaking be what? The hand was shaking. She could not pronounce words in her speech. It was such an embarrassment. I mean, when somebody had thought through the thing and written a speech for you, you can't read it. It happened in the State House. And I'm sure there are so many people with all kinds of experiences about ministers that they can tell. So there are many people in the Ghanaian community who have had encounters with ministers. And they ask themselves, why should we have 80 people ministering our affairs when they are clearly so incompetent? Some of them are so clearly incompetent. Some of them cannot tell their left from their right. Some of them, indeed, you would not employ them as messengers in your office. And this is a fact. You understand? All kinds of government have given all kinds of excuses. They've spoken about gender balance, regional balance, the fact that 50% of ministers must come from parliament and so on, as justification for bringing this quality of ministers into public affairs and so on. But whatever it is, these qualities of this quality of ministers suggests that these ministers have nothing to offer, nothing or little to offer. So it goes into the argument that let's prune down the numbers so that we can have competent and efficient people running public affairs. This is one part of the argument. For those who are close to me, I'm sure Dr. Percy, this is not the first time he's going to hear this story. I've told this story over and over again. I happen to have known somebody who was made a deputy minister. And I knew the person before the appointment. In fact, 3 days before the appointment, I was with the person. This is a person who could not afford a motorbike. And I know what I'm talking about. Could not afford a motorbike. The person is made a minister. 2 weeks later, the person comes to my office and is complaining bitterly. Why have they given her? I was going to say something which would have let the cat out of the bag. But why have they given this deputy minister a 4-year-old Land Cruiser? Why? It is discrimination against an ethnic group. Because they don't respect people like me who come from a certain part of the country. That's how they can give me a 4-year-old Land Cruiser deputy minister. My Jove, it taught me some important lessons. There's another story, and I'm sure all of you here know that story. One of the things that changes very fast when ministers are appointed is their chair, the chair they sit on in the office. It changes very fast. New ministers don't like sitting in old chairs used by their predecessors for all kinds of reasons. And they demand renovation of the offices, not because the offices are ugly, not because what is in the office is bad, but because their pastors have told them stories about how evil spirits can be planted in their chairs and decks and so on, and they need to scrape the office and so on. So they need to have renovated offices. And if you're familiar with the cost of renovations of ministerial offices and so on, you can begin to understand what I'm talking about. And then, it doesn't matter whether the old minister had the bungalow renovated 3 weeks before he was sacked. The new minister must have it renovated to his or her taste and so on. So I'm just talking about the element of cost. Cost is one of the reasons why people in the public insist that we should have a certain number of ministers. Cost is one of the reasons. And then you're looking at the Ghanaian population, and I don't think, if you do all the extrapolations and so on, the Ghanaian population has as yet hit the 30 million mark. It may be around 27, 28 million and so on. But Ghana we are so very special, we are so very peculiar, that 28 million people need to have 110 ministers administering their affairs. When there are countries in the world with a population in excess of 200 million people whose ministerial population is under 30. You understand? So the question is asked, what kind of a people are Ghanaians? Who are we that, as for us, we need 110 ministers to govern our affairs? That's part of the equation. It's an important part of the equation. Now, there's another dimension. And let me limit myself to 1992. In 1992, I was part of the opposition. You know, I was a very strong, let me put it mildly, I was a very strong part of the opposition. And indeed, we used to make a lot of noise about the size of government. That's Mr. Rawlings. What's wrong with him? How can he appoint so many ministers? It was one of the flagship criticism that we leveled against the Rawlings regime. Then, Mr. Kufuor came to power, and then, so to everybody's surprise and shock, he appointed more ministers than Mr. Rawlings that we were criticizing. What is this? Of course, he came up later and apologized and said that he did not understand governance very well when he was in opposition. And that now faced with the reality, he can understand why Mr. Rawlings appointed so many ministers and so on. That was 2001. But we did not spare Mr. Kufuor, because I have been perpetually in opposition. So when Mr. Kufuor was in power, I was also in opposition at that time. And we took Mr. Kufuor to RAS, criticized him so much and so on. Then opposition leader President Mills said, if I come into power, I will reduce the number of ministers. And indeed, he did reduce the number of ministers by an insignificant margin. He did, he reduced. And we said, no, if we mean reduction, we mean reduction, not token reductions and so on. And come and see our friends from the New Patriotic Party. They were livid with anger and so on. Then President Mahama came and also reduced it a little. He said, no, you can't do this. And there is an interview which I conducted. I then had a show on TV3. It was called Hot Issues. I had the privilege of interviewing Mr. Kobna Ejei Ejapon, then General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party. And Mr. Ejapon was emphatic, and I mean emphatic, that this country can be run with 20 ministers. 20 ministers. That interview is on YouTube. You can check. So how come? What has happened? If you look at the Constitution and you do the calculations very carefully, the Constitution prescribes a minimum of 40 ministers. 19 cabinet ministers is what the Constitution prescribes. 10 regional ministers, that makes it 29. The Attorney General may or may not be a minister if you read the Constitution very carefully. But if you add her, that comes to about 30. You understand? And then you can have, as a deputy ministers, there's no limit and so on. So if you look at the Constitution very carefully, the Constitution prescribes at the minimum about 40 ministers and so on. And yet, we were told that it was possible, even in spite of the constitutional injunction, to run this country with 20 ministers. Now here we are. Now, before the reshuffle was announced, I first had wind of this reshuffle publicly when Mr. Kwame Sifakai, host of Peace FM, announced that something dramatic was going to happen in 48 hours. And he made the announcement in such a way as to leave no doubt that he was talking about a cabinet reshuffle. And indeed, on that program, people then started sending greetings to persons, to announce that perhaps they could be brought in or sent out of the ministerial list. Within 48, and to be fair to Mr. Sifakai, in 48 hours, it happened. He knew what he was talking about. He wasn't joking. He knew what he was talking about. It happened. But you see, the matter was presented in such a way that we all began expecting an earth-shaking ministerial reshuffle. There is nothing earth-shaking about what has been announced. Indeed, at some point, some people publicly declared that the number of ministers will be reduced to 84. Some said 85, some said 86. So that was the figure we were anticipating. Now, if you look at the reshuffle which has occurred, it would appear that the number has even been increased by 1. Because now you have a new ministerial position, Minister of State in the office of the Vice President. It's the first one.
2 ministers of state are the Vice President.
There could be, but the new appointment, I'm talking about the new appointment, Minister of State at the office of the Vice President. And in fact, this is the first time I'm hearing this rendition. Because all the time what I've heard is Minister of State at the presidency. Now, you have Minister of State at the office of the Vice President. So you could have Minister of State at the office of the President. And if care is not taken, we may soon be having Ministers of State at the office of the Chief of Staff. And then you can continue and so on. But this is interesting. You understand?
First lady.
But this is interesting. So public expectation has not been met with this reshuffle. But you see, again, I'm very, very cautious. Of all these years of engagement in the public domain, I've learned one thing. Be careful what you say. You understand? Because you can always be surprised and you can always be shocked. There is no indication that this is the final reshuffle. It is possible that in the weeks ahead, new announcements may be made. So, again, I am willing to wait. It is possible that the reshuffle is not over yet and that the bigger things are about to happen. Now, we are told that presidents are not under any obligation to disclose reasons why they appoint ministers or disappoint them. We are told that they are not under any obligation. I challenge that, but that's what we are told. But you see, when these changes are made, sometimes it is necessary to pose some serious questions. Let's take Madam Otiko Jaba. Of course, all of us know the problems she's had in that ministry. We know of her battles with Mr. Bugri Nabu and others. We know that. You understand? We are aware of how she has been criticized over things that sometimes are very petty, like hairstyle and so on. We know that. May this have in any way contributed to her new designation, to changing her designation? May, I don't know. And in fact, if these influenced her new designation, why would she be removed as Minister for Children, Gender and something to be made ambassador, diplomat? Because I would have thought that the standards for diplomat in terms of social comportment and so on are much higher. I would have thought. I don't know. So what informed this decision? I don't know. Maybe we will never know. But then it is important to ask some questions and so on. And you can ask all those questions about everybody. Mustafa Hamid, in fact, let's be fair to him, he's Dr. Mustafa Hamid. Removed from the Ministry of Information to Zongo and Inner City Development. For all I know, he's not a planner. I have never known Mustafa to be a planner. In fact, the first time I knew Mustafa, and Mustafa is a great friend of mine, you understand. The first time I knew him, he was in a Marxist study group in Tamale. But it is true. It's true. That's my first relationship with Mustafa was a cadre in a Marxist study group in Tamale. Why do I want to destroy it? Is it bad to be a cadre in a Marxist study group? Percy, is it a crime? Me, I think that, look, it is something to be proud about. Okay. You understand? And I'm very, very proud that that young man started his journey from Marxism.
The president did.
So why are you saying that I'm putting him in trouble when the president is like him? Percy, what's wrong with you, man? Percy, what's wrong with you? You understand? But, so, why would Mustafa end up in the Zongo? Is he being removed from the Ministry of Information because his performance was not satisfactory? And if his performance was not satisfactory in the Ministry of Information, how can his performance be satisfactory in the Zongo? Or is it that in the Zongo we expect a much lower threshold than the Ministry of Information? I don't know. Today I'm just asking questions. So,
Boniface.
Yeah, Boniface Abubakar Siddiq. I thought he was a Zongo man.
Yeah. He's an authority on Zongos.
He's an authority on Zongos.
MP from Medina.
Yeah.
So he's an authority on Zongos. Yeah, you sure he's an authority on Zongos?
Yeah.
You say that?
Yes.
He knows the history of the Zongos and so on?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I can understand. Maybe there's an assignment related to the Zongos in the Vice President's office. I don't know. But somehow these things must make sense. You understand? They must make sense. There must be a way of assessing these major governmental moves and so on. Right now, I am walking about in the labyrinth.
Mind you, there's a battle of the succession.
I'm walking about in the labyrinth, totally confused. And you know what the labyrinth is? God bless Ghana.
Mates.
God bless Ghana. And that brings us to 33 after 10. Dr. David Percy.
Thank you, Sammy. Or I should say that I should not be in a relaxed mood because I'm burying my uncle today. But just taking off on the last point that Kwesi was talking, I mean, it's almost a digression. If you have to be Minister of Information in this setup, you'll be used up very quickly because of the number of times you have to play the useful idiot and to tell barefaced lies. Oh my. So anybody, no matter how good you are,
You haven't changed.
I'm making analysis.
He says he's continuing from where he left off, so it's a foundation.
No, don't bring me into this. Do your own thing. Why do you want to bring me into this useful idiot
about
and
the
so on?
issue of the ex-Minister of Information, I'm saying that this regime needs about 2 useful idiots a week. And every time the Minister of Information has to feature. And there are some stuff that are very difficult to speak to, without looking a complete idiot. Like this American scam. We'll come to that in a jiffy. This scam was cooked in the president's kitchen. It has all the indicators that was cooked in the president's kitchen. It appeared, from what one has heard, that one of the minister's marching orders, his brief on appointment, was to scuttle the marriage deal. And in doing that, people found an opportunity, to borrow the words of this MPP jurist, to create loot and share. It was a fine opportunity not to be wasted or missed. Indeed, they counted on their zombies in Parliament to follow the lead that they are taking in that treacherous, treasonous agreement with the Americans, to pass it through. Except that on this occasion, the stench was way too much. Which is why we are where we are. But you know, there's a background to this, and it's important to situate this in the context of the general crisis of our political economy. First is the broad framework of neocolonialism and dependent capitalist development, and the fact that continuously people find places of reward serving foreign interests. That keeps us down. So you find various offshore partners in this business. Okay? Then you also have the issue of what has not been spoken about. These persons, the proper term for them are the comprador bourgeoisie. Comprador is Portuguese for agent, because it is not possible to maintain this system of slavery without local actors who are sniffing out and looking for every opportunity, acting with foreign interests to fleece us. And in fact, in many of the communities along our shore, those who first hosted the invaders, you find it in the local sayings. Like the Ghana say, Bohe ni ayo. You even find it in Fanti. I'm sure you may find it in Neve, in Hunter. That associating with a foreigner is a path to riches. And continuously, we'll be talking about this. You have local actors working in cahoots with foreigners who package what belongs to all of us, hand it over in exchange for crumbs. Although I'm not sure that in America we're talking about crumbs. But the general principle is established. We've had at least 500 years of practice at this. But Ghana excels globally in this business. Now, the worrying thing is that we don't convict these persons of treason and line them up and shoot them. We cheer them. We reserve the front rows of churches for them, which encourages others to follow in their footsteps. So, for instance, one example, a few years old, is what happened with the Cosmos thing. There's a calculus, there's a calculation that over the lifespan of that deal, Ghana will lose $2 billion. Okay? At least we know of $300 million that immediately accrued to, I don't know whether it's President Kuswo or his frontmen, because he has said publicly that he was the key person in engineering the Cosmos deal. Okay, he has said it publicly. So I don't know whether it is his frontman or himself, but we know of that. $300 million. You could go on and on and on and on. So that is part of the context, of the background of our conversation. Then you have the business of our politics, which is based on patronage, and which explains why the president has that many ministers. You notice that in his campaign, he did not brook any persons who will not toe the line. But having won, he has to reach out to many of those people who have been bruised in his single-minded campaign to become president at all costs. And we know, it didn't have to be told by Mr. Nyantichi, that a lot of resources went into that, including the sale of personal and family assets. So we must know, if we don't know by now, that every minister, every appointee has put resources into this, and that they are looking to replenish and to build up further. I mean, if you take a risk, if you go into a venture and you put in, let's say, 2 million cedis, I'm being conservative, you don't expect that people will be happy if they recoup the 2 million cedis, do you? Okay? Then you also have, added to all of this, the sense of our president and his party of entitlement. After all, this country is their property. Okay? And so, all I see happening is that various groups, cabals come together. They know what the end result they want. They put it together. Then they deal with the questions later. Okay, and Ameri is just one example of that. Whilst I'm on that, I should be able to say that, look, the so-called reshuffle and the role of the media cabal in whipping up public expectations were all part of the plot. First of all, to divert attention from Ameri, okay, and to seem to be listening to what the Ghanaian public have spoken on, okay. But those who have done the sums are suggesting that we have at least one addition, possibly two additions. Okay. Now, the last thing I should add in terms of the context is that our president is running a government of family, friends, cronies. If one listens to the talk on the street, former and current concubines and girlfriends, etc., etc. Now, anybody who knows anything about running a family business knows that members of family can only be appointed at the top. Family is always only at the top. Okay? And that it is almost impossible to dismiss a member of family unless there's broad consensus within the family that he's letting the team down. In which case he may be shunted aside to some less exposed role. So really the truth is that having gone about very carefully selecting people such that every person, every interest is addressed, it's almost impossible to sack them. If anything, there can only be more additions, however disguised. And Kwesi was privileged to hear it said by one of the leaders of the cabal, who started this campaign of whetting up public expectations. But as he himself says, it is all Hanya. I don't speak Hausa, but I believe Hanya means Hanya.
Way.
Way. No.
In the context,
It's
Okay.
it's, how would I say, Hanya. Nothing of substance, but which is put out to be substantial.
We say mere puff.
Yes. You understand? This is what, I mean, I've heard Kwesi say it severally on air. So I assume that is the meaning. Okay, and I've heard others also say it. Okay? Or as they'll say in Shri Ni Kutreyam. You understand? It's all puff about nothing. Much ado about nothing. Okay? But intended to take the sting and possibly to quell the stench out of the American thing. And Kwesi has made the point that nowhere has it been said that this matter has been withdrawn from Parliament. Okay? Having put so much energy into putting this thing together over the last 18 months, I don't think that this thing will be quietly put to rest yet. Now, one other thing that has struck me about many of these counts is the attraction for the 15-year cycle. I think we first heard about 15 years with the Ken Bond, right? Then recently we've heard about the 15-year deal with the NIA, okay? And then Kelly GVG, if I'm not mistaken. And then the last one is Ameri. There may have been others that have escaped me. But what appears to be happening is that clearly our president is superintending the establishment of schemes that would fleece the Ghanaian people, generate cash flows and fabulous incomes well beyond his tenure, whether it is 4 years or 8 years. Actually, I'll be very surprised if the Ghanaian people put up with this thievery and incompetence for more than 4 years. I'll be very, very surprised. But that is what we have on our hands. And some other point that Kwesi also raised about the quality of ministers. Given all that I've said, and if there are any people out there who still have doubts, they must clearly understand that the MPP, certainly our president and his government, are not in power to deal with our issues, whether they are the issues of unemployment, issues of housing, or whatever. Even in the area of education, they are here because they've taken what rightfully belongs to them. And the rest of us must put up and shut up. If some things appear to be working for us, they are not intended. They are merely accidental. We are seeing right before our eyes. We've launched on a journey of improvisation with the education sector, with the ultimate objective of creating a market for elite private education, such that in a few years hence, our public secondary schools will be reduced to what the CITOs became. Right? And that to have any possibility of advancement along the educational chain, you have to go to an expensive private school. Okay? For instance, I learned that this professor, I think Chrissy spoke about him last week, is part of a group that has put up at least one private boarding school near Dodowa. Yes. Yes. I have seen it with my eyes. Someone has pointed it out to me. But that is where we are launched. So very soon, poor parents will have to cough up a lot of money if they are interested in their children making any headway. That's what's being put up now, to the cheer of the working people who are being shortchanged. Indeed, in electing our president, we have put the hyena, or is it the wolf, or is it the fox, or the hawk, in charge of the hen coop. If you do that, you have no right to expect any good returns. But after all, he said, submission. So, good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Percy, for your submission this morning. Let me read some of the comments that have come through before we begin digesting the second issue for today. And start with a comment sent to me by lawyer Chris Akume. And he says, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And he goes on to say, as to you, Dr. David Percy, he says, tell Dr. Percy that henya in Ewe means messy. Something that is messy, yes, something that is messy. So, henya, in Ewe. All right, so let me go on and read some few comments that have come through this morning. I'll begin from those that I received on Twitter and then come back to others on Facebook as well. But if you just join us, you're welcome. And just as others have done, so can you also send me your comments. I will start with one from Dave. Dave says, I really wish people will critically listen to Dr. David Percy. He speaks so much truth about the local collaborator of neo-colonialist system. This one from AU Farouk says, good morning to you, Eshen, and to your panelists. My heart bleeds for this country. What a merry reshuffle. No wonder dogs are in control. This is totally super incompetent by the president. This one says, it's interesting and amazing fact that permeates through God will expose all of them one after the other. Another one from Habib from his home says, good morning, Sam, and to your listeners. Sam, the Amerideal has clearly exposed the corrupt, the super incompetence of NPP and Akufo-Addo's government. The Ghanaians must wake up from our sleeping slumbers, else before we wake up, we would have been sold back into slavery once more. This one says, tell Mr. Pratt that every picture now has metadata inside, which can be extracted to know the exact date and location the picture was taken. And that goes for all the many voices that people claim has been doctored and don't belong to them. The tech is cheap too. And I think you're referencing Gabi Ochudaku and Bumpty's picture. Yes, indeed, the metadata is in the picture. This one from John Terry Tresh says, agreement is signed on 20th July 2018 and the president gives executive approval on 25th of July 2018. But the letter to the Ministry of Energy authorizing an agent from Ameri in the agreement is dated 24th July. Hey, NPP, they are just armed robbers. This one from Bright says, okay, all right. Okay, let me come down a bit and look for, I think I've read, from Stephen Kobnatu says, was a government that explained that tax increases were needed to rake in more money to meet the demands of the people, one would have thought that the government would cut down on its expenditure. However, list of ministers have been increased, more salaries. And those are a few of the comments that I can see. This one says, is from Nisha, where he says, another fraudulent way of saying Ghanaians have short memory. And you are referencing the Ghana Beyond Aid mantra, why the president is not been speaking about it again. So those are a few of the comments on Twitter that I can share with you. Let me go to Facebook and read some of the comments there. This one from Bright Matthias Dachomo. He says, I was listening to a program yesterday on one of your sister media stations, and surprisingly, one Mr. Andrews proposed that the president needs to be commended because not a dime of the Ghana cedi has been wasted in the renegotiated deal. And I asked myself, should the minority and IES and some other civil societies not vociferously oppose the deal? We would have heard that the president would have passed this with his ministers. Politicians should be genuine in their politics and avoid political antics and gimmicks. And that's yours coming through this morning from Chigbe. Michael Seriam says, good morning, Mr. Shem. I can understand, Mr. Pratt, that for the fear of a dog bite and the unavailability of vaccines for rabies, he tend to be unnecessarily careful about the subject of misled. But Mr. Pratt, if a president in opposition managed to compose a song out of a merry dew, even try to find place for the song in a Methodist hymn now, yet come into power and sign that renegotiated deal without perusing it properly, then he's not qualified to be pardoned for saying that he was misled. Mike sent that one through. Ken Farouk says, regards to you and to your panelists, I am asking you, was that a reshuffle or musical chairs the president was making his substandard ministers dance to? This is Potogumu Shiegumu government. Same here. That's from Ken Farouk from Kaswa, sending that one through. This one from Professor Kwame Aristokwa says, I am touched by the comment of lawyer David Annan. When is NDC treating the dismissal of Charles to say, and when is the NDC acting on it? It rings the bell for the ardent bell listeners. And you go on to say that we should vote for Mami Efua as Deputy NDC Women National Organizer and Mohammed Abdulaziz as NDC Zongo Caucus Organizer. Those are the comments I received this morning on the show. The show is proudly brought to us by TT Brothers. They are the key distributors for Ankoti, a premium malt, and also the Tango drink as well. They've got different flavors: the orange, the cherry, they got the pineapple and the apple as well, that you can purchase and use for your occasions, for the funerals, for the weddings, for the naming ceremonies. Make sure you get the Tango fruit juice, and also make sure you get the Ankoti premium malt as well. It's 11 on the show, and we are moving to our next issue.
Coming before Mutala, because I'll have to.
No, I'm coming straight to you.
Okay.
I'm coming straight to you. So.
You know, I want to pick up on where Dr. Percy left, and that is on the issue of our own self-destruction. You know, the worst attribute that we call the Oedipus, the Oedipus complex, is where you yourself are your own worst enemy. You know, there are some aspects about this banking issue, but I'm sure Mutala and Percy and Kwesi will touch on those. I'll just look at the legal aspect. But before I do that, I want to say, Sami, can anyone tell me why the dollar is going up? When you look critically at the situation, there is no fundamental reason why the dollar should be going up. And that is because we do not use the dollar so much, or we do not need the dollar so much when it comes to our imports and maybe for our exports. We buy everything, practically everything, from China. So why is it that we haven't yet decided to switch from the dollar to the yuan? But let me tell you, There's a good reason why no government has dared to do that. The dollar is the basis of the United States military, financial, and political power. It is the currency, the reserve currency of this world. And therefore, they can print as much of it as they want to finance their own consumption and to buy whatever they want from whatever country in this world without being really accountable. And that is what they now call quantitative easing. Now, Ghana cannot do that because nobody wants your CD. Imagine if we could print CDs and the CDs would be accepted in the States. My gosh, we'd buy half of Britain in a minute. Would own it. That is the equivalency. Now, look at what is happening to Turkey. Look at what is happening to Russia. Russia has about 21 maximum billion dollars worth of trade with the United States. That's insignificant compared to the trade with the rest of the world, with Europe. Yet, just the mere imposition of a couple of sanctions, the latest ones, has led to a decline in the value of the ruble. Now, there is something that people should know. What you've got to know is that there is a conspiracy, and as Dr. Percy was saying, this brings that to mind, in the world, and particularly in Africa, and specifically to Ghana, where in spite of the Bank of Ghana knowing very well that we do not need the amount of dollars we have, and therefore there is no logical reason why the dollar should be going up, do not still switch our currency preference to yuan. You know, the Chinese currency has two names, renminbi and yuan, but it's easier to say yuan instead of renminbi. Why? And Nigeria have started. Why is it that all this while, and I believe in our time, Murtala, the finance minister, Mr. Honorable Tekbe, tried to do something along those lines and institute an auction of the yuan. It makes no sense for us to be using dollars. We buy dollars here of CD, send the dollar to China, where we do most of our imports, and then change the dollar from the dollar to yuan in China, come back and then sell the items in CDs and then change them back into dollar. When you can buy the yuan straight and cut the dollar out. But as I've said, there's a caveat. You do that at your peril as a country. As a country, the United States is not prepared to allow any other country to forego the dollar. Not even the Chinese, not even the Russians have been able to do it. But we must find a way out of the system because it is becoming a millstone around our necks. The second thing is, why? How is it possible? Why does the dollar go up in the first place? Look, the level of imports are stable. Even reducing because people can't buy things. So what accounts for the dollar going up? Because I don't have too much time, I'm not going to waste the precious time that we have in explaining why it is. But there's a reason why it is. Now, on this topic, the last thing I'm going to say, and I'll let your minds to, is that your independence. Ghanaians, do you know how you got your independence? You think, and I'm sure Kwesi will tell you, maybe Dr. Percy to echo that we got it because of Kwame Nkrumah. That is part of the story. As a matter of fact, you got your independence, Ghanaians, because of the United States. You see, after the Second World War, Europe had been decimated and devastated. Germany, Britain, France, Spain, all those countries were in ruins. Their economies likewise. And that is how the dollar became the reserve currency of the world. Because the United States was not attacked, it was not touched, and nobody invaded the soil of the United States. So they had their factories, they had their industrial capacity in place. And they were providing everything, including the Marshall Plan, for Europe and Japan, it's one of their enemies, to be resuscitated. Now, one thing that was happening was that Britain at the time was the United States of today. The pound sterling at the time was the dollar of today. Now the United States, and that shows how single-minded they can be in pursuit of their national interest, and how, as a country, Ghana should learn from this kind of behavior. Now the British and the Americans, we all know, are cousins. Yeah, what did the Americans do to the British? The Americans needed to become the #1 country and to supplant the British, and therefore they issued the instructions to the British and the French to forego all their colonies, because the colonies were prime sources of reinvestment for the British and the French economies. And therefore, the person who was in the United States at the time, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, realized that this was the political trend and that the British have been given their marching orders. But the idiots from the UGCC, and I'm sorry if I call them idiots, I'm not going to add useful to it, did not know this. Typically, as an educated elite in this country, professors and doctors and lawyers, they didn't know what was going on. Kwame Nkrumah knew. So when he came back, that is why he said self-government now is out. We want independence immediately, because he knew that it would be backed up by the United States. And that is why the British had to grant India their independence first, and then the Gold Coast their independence second. That is Ghanaians, how you got your independence, at the behest of the United States, because the US wanted to supplant the British. Now, when we come to the banking sector, we find that this business of being #1 has predominated. And I wouldn't be surprised if external actors are driving this decision on the part of the Bank of Ghana to reduce the number of local banks. Why is it that it's just the local banks? But before I wrap up, let me give you a quick, a quick piece of legislation for you to think about whether what the Bank of Ghana is doing is appropriate and whether it is legal. Now, when you look at the Banking Act, this was brought in by the MPP. The Banking Act replaced the old PNDC Act, and it was done in 2004, and it's Act 673. Now, by Section 62 of that Act, we have what we call the mandatory revocation of banking license. And that is what the Bank of Ghana has employed to reduce the number of banks by 7. And it states this, and I want all of you to listen very carefully. The Bank of Ghana shall revoke the license given to a bank to carry on banking business when the entire capital base of the bank is eroded and the liabilities exceed the assets, unless the shareholders are able to inject additional capital to restore the banks within 6 months. So you got 3 caveats. 1, the entire capital base of the bank must be eroded. 2, the liabilities must exceed the assets. And 3, the shareholders must be given the chance to inject additional capital into the bank to restore it. My question is, were these things done? Did the Bank of Ghana, before employing the draconian provision 62 of the Banking Act, examine to see if the entire capital base of the various 5 banks had been eroded? And Mutala, I'm not too sure that on the evidence, the entire capital base of those 5 banks had been eroded. Yes, they had some defaults. Yes, they had outstanding liabilities. But the law is that before you provoke this provision, the entire capital base of the bank must be eroded, and the liabilities must exceed the assets. Now, that's a balance sheet question. They had liabilities, but they also had assets Have we been told whether the liabilities that they had, whether it's 300 owed by somebody or 30 million that had been taken by an MP who is now a chairman of a board or whatever, who denies it anyway, what were the assets of those banks? Because if the assets exceeded the liabilities, then they should go to court. Thirdly, were the shareholders invited to inject additional capital into those banks before the taking over was done? Now, there are a lot of other provisions which come into play, but we're running out of time, so I'll end it here so that the three others can pick it up from here. But please think about these three things that I've told you, which might invalidate the action that the Bank of Ghana has taken.
Thank you, Lawyer David Annan, for your submission. I come to Dr. David Percy. Doc.
Thank you. Well, we have in our hands an ongoing train wreck. Superintended over by the governor and his team of the Bank of Ghana. And it's not too clear to me from where I sit what the objective is. But within the space of 12 months, we've had first Capital and UT, and now we have which were taken up by the Ghana Commercial Bank. Mm-hmm. And then you've had this last tranche of 5 taken over by a new beast in the shape of the Ghana Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited. Yes, okay. Now, this is a feature that's not unique to Ghana, by the way. Now, my starting off position is that banks are public utilities. That's how we should think of them, which must be regulated in the public interest beyond the fiscal assets and the cash that they have. Banks operate on the basis of confidence. Why? If any bank is working properly, it cannot pay back to all those who have deposited money to it their monies if they should all go at once asking for it. Because at any time, those monies, a lot of that money would have been lent out. Okay? So if everybody who has put money with a bank goes back for it at the same time because of a loss of confidence, it will collapse. So no matter how well structured and regulated, any banking system, okay, is subject to sudden collapse if there's a loss of public confidence. Okay. Now, one other aspect of what is happening is that many local contractors, businesses, will find out that it's much easier to deal with the local banks who advance monies for various contracts, often public contracts. And we know, this has been said, and we've heard it, that, for instance, many contractors are owed monies by our government. These contractors have gone to banks, local banks largely, for financing. So if there's a failure of government to settle its debts, it puts our local banks in danger. And so in a certain sense, you could almost say that this has been deliberately engineered by government. Then you have the other side, some of which is coming up recently, about the plain self-dealing and fraud that has gone on, which all adds up to just one concept. You privatize the profits and you socialize the losses of the debts. Indeed, granting a banking license is often the path to guarantee that you can take as much as you want and profiteer privately, and that if the mess comes up, all of us will pay for it. But this is the most solid reason why banks treated public utilities. Because you have this situation, which is the situation in all the capitalist economies, that banks are private, they are encouraged to do things that are risky, that put other people's money at risk, which generates enormous profits to those who manage them. Okay? But when the losses come, far away from the so-called capitalist dictum that those who put their monies at risk must bear the losses are socialized. In the case of the recent 5 banks, I understand that the taxpayer is going to have to come up with something like, is it 6 billion cedis to pay for the gambling losses. Okay? The self-dealing, and on some occasions just theft that has been superintended over must clearly have involved not just persons managing those banks, but also must have involved complicity or conspiracy of persons in the Bank of Ghana. Because it's impossible to see how all this mess could have developed without complete. If you're talking of, for instance, the establishment of banks through fraud, okay, or the fact that, for instance, in one case, we are hearing that money that the Bank of Ghana had injected to stabilize a bank had been turned around and used to establish another bank. So where was the Bank of Ghana? How could it not detect that money that it had provided had come back to it for the purpose of establishing another bank? How is that possible? Okay. Now, I see that in bringing up this thing, you've raised it in the context of what? A call by the Christian Council. Mm-hmm. Have they finished eating? Mr. Host, have they finished eating? Because hitherto we've been accustomed to a very loud silence. And I was told that that is good manners. You don't talk whilst you're eating. Why are they wasting our ears with this call? In any case, we know that very little will come out of these highwaymen and armed robbers who were in charge, in some cases, of these banks. Why? What has happened with the collapse of the Capital Bank and the UT Bank before? And why are they now titillating us with stories about the aspects of the rot? As we say in our popular, as is said in the popular parlance, okay? And I was very surprised if anybody will be arrested, investigated, prosecuted, and jailed on the basis of this organized thievery. I'll be very surprised. I have no confidence that it will happen. Okay? But then, runaway parasitism in banking has become a feature of decaying capitalism. And there are examples you can take from the UK, from America, and from other places, where those who say that they are the enemies of socialism practice socialism when it comes to debt, the gambling losses that the banks run up. So you can do whatever in the knowledge that the state will come to the rescue and cover your gambling losses. In fact, you run away, you leave a very wealthy man or woman with very little fear of being prosecuted. You understand? Very little fear of being prosecuted. You can get away with your loot. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in private educational institutions. You can invest in other businesses, sure in the knowledge that the people of Ghana will take up the losses. Now, if this is the deal, who wouldn't go for it? If this is a deal, think about it. Who wouldn't go for it? They can put together a portfolio of investors, get a license, run up, but gamble, in fact. It's almost a license to gamble. Showing the knowledge that the state of Ghana will come to your rescue and pay your gambling losses. That's what happened in America with the subprime crisis. Okay, it takes various shapes and forms depending on which territory. Okay. In Ghana, at least, we are learning that some of it, people used money to acquire other assets, real estate, and etc., etc. But if this is the equation, if this is the deal, who will not go for it? So first of all, in terms of solutions, in terms of the way out, you must begin to see banks as the public utilities that they are, whose business is to lubricate the wheels of industry. Now, when the banks become ends in themselves, when people see the banks as the places where value is generated, then we are into parasitism and we are running into danger. You have this strange situation which has taken its course in other places, which has arrived here, where the best salaries, the best incomes are generated in banking. Okay? When it is industry, which is supposed to service, is running at a loss or severely challenged. So talk to the next guy who's coming out of university. They're looking for a job in a bank. The bank is not where the wealth is generated. Wealth is generated in manufacture, in industry, which the banks should service. Now we have this thing upside down. And it's about time we reoriented our thinking and our focus. Otherwise, more of this is guaranteed. Not less. Now, at this stage, I expect that, for instance, the governor would have resigned or been sacked. But it has not happened. It will not happen. I had someone speaking to it in the course of a week on your show, talking about the fact that the bank has become merely a political tool in the hands of the people at the Ministry of Finance and by extension the president. Of course, the president appoints the governor, and we know that in the last several years, less than 2 years ago, when the MPP took power, they ensured that the entire team in charge of the bank were harassed out of office. So we have to assume that they are playing to an agenda set by government, by the president. We have to assume that. Where it is headed, one cannot say. It appears that part of it, the agenda, is to ensure that the banking remains firmly in the control of foreign entities, which will not be a surprise to the extent that whichever sector you look at, you have Ghanaians beavering away, working to turn over what belongs to us collectively to foreigners for crumbs. So it fits into that general pattern.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Percy. A texter wants me to correct you on the point you made about where wealth is created in Ghana. He says something. Please remind Dr. Percy that there is a third category when it comes to wealth creation in Ghana today, and that is the churches. Thank you for that text message.
The churches harvest wealth that has been created elsewhere.
Comrade. Comment on this banking issue.
Well, I'm wondering whether I have a lot to say on it. I say this because almost everybody in Ghana is aware, particularly those who are interested in wanting to know why there will be such outrageous collapse of our banks. Banks don't have money on themselves. Monies that are operated with by banks are monies that are kept there by depositors, isn't it? People must put their money in banks before the banks can operate, of course. Banks as business entities or corporate entities would have to be started by some group of persons. They would have board of directors. They would have management who would steer the affairs of those banks. We cannot have this discussion without looking at what happened in the past. And if you permit me, I will just say briefly about this. It's a whole gamut of issues, and I don't think that time will permit us to discuss it, but only to say that before 2015, we had some two known banks that were in distressed position, Capital Bank specifically. And interestingly, this bank, the board chair, was a very respected Reverend Minister in this country who criticized the NDC government and who was virtually a political campaigner against the NDC government at the time. And he pointed out to some of things that he felt as a man of God that were not being done right. Many people had problems with his line of preaching and the outright attack and vilification of the NDC administration. But there were many people who also said that, look, that is how men of God are supposed to be. When they see ills in society, they would have to talk about them. So one would least have expected or suspected that that same person would be superintending over something that was even rotty. I mean, that was more rot than what he was condemning every single opportunity he had. And let me make this thing very clearly. We're discussing this as Ghanaians. It doesn't matter who is involved. And I remember when people criticized him, he had the opportunity to mount the pulpit and virtually insulted those who raised genuine concerns about his dealings with the Capital Bank as the chair of the board of Capital Bank. He said those who are criticizing him, he said they were insulting him and that they looked like insults. For me, it was extremely shocking. And at the time, I realized that the discourse changed from looking at a financial terror, outright thievery, that was hoisted on the people of this country and our financial sector, to people questioning and attacking a man of God, as though a man of God can criticize entire government, yet no one should criticize the man of God if he engages in an act, whether directly or indirectly, that brings about untold hardship on people. Remember that the banks were dealing with people's life saving, and for which reason they owed those people a moral duty to have protected those savings of theirs and ensure that it was not wantonly, if like, misused. So they were in debt. In fact, they had indicated that they didn't have any money in it left. And as we sit today, Sean, we still do not know what they did with the money. We still do not know the board that was chaired by Pastor Mensa Otabel and the UT Bank, what they did with the money. Because if people have their deposit in a bank in which you are board chair, and 610 million Ghana cedis could not be accounted for, you didn't know what that money was, where it went, depositors, you couldn't even pay them. I think that it is morally right for people to demand to know. And the only persons from whom that huge responsibility and a demand could be made would be the chair of the board, particularly someone who is supposed to be an epitome of our moral society and who admonishes us every single day the need for us to fear God in how we manage the affairs and responsibilities that are given to us. 610 million. As we sit today, we still do not know what they did with the 610 million Ghana cedis. Remember, Wyoming was being prosecuted for 51 million. People supervise the stealing of 610 million, yet people still think that we should not criticize them, and we dare not even raise a finger about their conduct, which was done consciously. And you remember at the time this bank was collapsing, the same man was preaching and said that if you want to be a millionaire, go and bank with Capital Bank. And the evidence available is that at that time he knew that the bank was collapsing, yet he was using the pulpit to convince people to go bank at a bank which he knew in the heart of his heart that it was collapsing. That is gross immoral. Now, the 610 million was provided by the state to rescue that bank and one other bank. These were given to Ghana Commission. The 610 million, now what they did was not to use it to salvage the bank. They, as a matter of fact, decided through the same board chaired by the same man of God to share the money among themselves in what they describe as a business, what's the name? They had a term for it. It's a business promotion. And each was given 27 million Ghana cedis. In fact, 27.6 million Ghana cedis. And now what they did instead, they used those monies to set up other businesses. I think this is criminal. There can't be any justification whatsoever about what was done. Once again, the decision to share the money among the directors was done at a board, as a board meeting, and that board was chaired by the same Reverend Mensa Otabil. I mean, I think that let's get serious in this country. That if people their actions can't be questioned because they are considered as men of God, then who dare ask question the conduct of hardened criminals? Because we are all created equal. And in the sight of God, it's only God who knows who is closer to him. Now, if you had this problem, you haven't told us what you did with the money. The monies are given for you to, and you decided to share the money. It wasn't that the money, it was a board decision for what they call business promotion. We are yet to understand what that business promotion is. You had both, and that is why I agree with Reverend Palmer Buckle when he said that over 80 to 90% of corruption in this country is done by Christians and Muslims. And that is a fact. If you look at even that bank collapse, you have both Christians and Muslims in that bank as directors. And they do this, and I'm wondering whether they serve the God you and I serve, the God that each and every one of us serve every single day, whether Muslims or Christians or traditionalists or Zoroastrianists or Buddhists or whatever. I'm wondering whether indeed we have indeed recognized this. So we still want to know, and haven't not been told what those monies were used for. Now these monies were then distributed among themselves. But let me state this very clearly. The Minister of Finance, indeed, I am told, never hid his desperate attempt to have certain banks collapse, particularly, what's the name? Unibank. Now, and I am happy when lawyer David Annan pointed out to the law that regulates the conduct of not just the governor of Bank of Ghana, but the conduct of those who are engaged in it, and in the event and circumstances under which you can take certain decisions to either close banks or to take them as a state-owned banks to see how you can manage them. And Sean, you do so because the monies in those banks are monies that are put there by depositors. And therefore, you have a responsibility to do that. But there are conditions under which that can be done. And I was happy when he specifically stated what the Act says. The one, that the entire bank should indeed, the capital base of the bank should be eroded to the extent that liabilities should be more than the, if you like, deposit. So if you have a bank in which assets. Now, but you are looking at the capital when they say that it should be completely eroded, not only cash, but assets of the bank too. Because every bank, you determine how much they have based on both, cash and assets. Because those assets can also be converted to cash depending on the same. Because when you are going for a loan and they want a collateral doesn't necessarily need to, it shouldn't be cash. You should have a property, a physical structure, or something that you can use. Even you can have a business transaction which can be used under some circumstances as a collateral, because there is supposed to be a guarantee. Now let's take Unibank for example. There is no denying the fact that government owes Unibank a lot of money. And those monies are monies that government refused deliberately to pay contractors. A lot of contractors had their monies with government. Government refused to pay those contractors. Those contractors were banking with Unibank. So when you check in Unibank's books, they would have had their monies with government. If government had paid those monies, I think that they would have met that financial requirement, and for which reason the decision to do what they did to Unibank wouldn't have even have arisen. But government did that deliberately because the Minister of Finance had vowed to ensure that Unibank was collapsed. And it is not secret. It is not any secret. That has been the agenda of President Nana Addo and his brothers and cousins even when they were in opposition. That has been the agenda. So you have a Minister of Finance who engages in a lot of dubious, if you like, bonds that they raise. As we see today, the 5% of that fraudulent bond that they raise, we're still not being told. And he's on the spree. I remember when the two banks collapsed, the governor of Bank of Ghana indicated that we're never going to experience that again. Now we have 5 more banks that are gone. I'm not saying that Governor of Bank of Ghana or government should not ensure that the legal regimes or requirements that determines and regulates the conduct of banks are not operating. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that when there is a direct and conscious effort to have certain banks collapse so that banks with which they have an interest will survive, I really don't think that it helps. And you know one interesting thing? Almost all the foreign banks are in support of what government is doing. Almost all the foreign banks, because it is to their benefit. Now, couldn't you have indeed allowed those banks to see whether you can give them time within which they can be able to meet the requirements, and for which reason you went ahead and take and implemented the decision that you have taken?
Indicated we were going to do that.
Yes, but why did they do that? Why the rush? Why did government do what they did if there wasn't that agenda? And I can tell you, it has been the agenda of Kino Furata, and it is not a secret. So what they are doing is an agenda that they set in motion. And then they hide behind legalities. They hide behind, if you like, regulatory instruments to implement the agenda. And legally, they will say that we are not doing anything wrong. But morally, they know deep down them that they are doing something that is absolutely morally wrong. And that is precisely what they are doing. And I was happy listening to you. I don't know who you interviewed, who was talking about the job lost and the fact that about 2 Ghanaians have lost their lives as a result of distance. Over 2,000. Do you know the consequences that over 2,000 from 2 banks? Do you know what will happen? The number of people who were working in the 5 additional banks, that I can tell you will be getting close to 10,000. Now all these people are going to lose their jobs. Do you know the social consequences of this? And when those international banks, foreign banks are clapping, they are happy. Collapse more, so that we can exploit the Ghanaian people the more. If we want to look at challenges that institutions face, and for which reason we can implement the law to the fullest, then the Flagstaff House and the government should not be in existence. Because what kind of failure, wanton failures, messing up. So can one say on the basis of such, the Flagstaff House should be closed? On the basis of that, the Minister of Finance, the ministry that he supervises should, even the Governor of Bank of Ghana, even the Bank of Ghana itself, can one say that?
All right.
One cannot say that. Okay. So you see, it seems to me that it's risky any time we have these guys leading this country. And institution after institution is virtually collapsing under the watch of this government.
Right.
Every single institution is collapsing. So if we want to look at some of these things, the consequences of it are just enormous. Today, they are talking about Ibrahim. They are not talking about companies that Ibrahim set up. Everything is about Ibrahim. A desperate attempt to say that, yes, if you are talking about that, the effects we have and for which reason these decisions are taken were caused by the Mahama because his brother was involved. Was he involved in the 5 additional banks that were collapsing? And why would you go back making reference to what he did? I'm not saying that if Ibrahim or whoever engages in anything wrong should be left. Right. But you can't take the person. The companies were established. They are not Ibrahim. If you want to deal with Ibrahim, deal with him. But if you want to deal with business entities that he set up, for which reason those business entities have run into troubles, and legally speaking, nothing wrong was done for a decision that is taken by government, you can do that. But you don't take the person because you want to tie him with the Mahamas and once again lynch the Mahama. And unsuspected NDC people have taken advantage of it because we are doing politics and we are in an era of politics. So when they're attacking Mahamas, let's attack Mahamas because we think that it endures to our benefit. That is extremely shameful.
Thank you very much, Comrade, for your submission. We have 20 minutes to check out of here. Mr. Pratt, you take the final bite for us before we leave here for the sports guys to take over. You're still here with us on Alhaji and Alhaji. Comments have come through. I will share these comments with you before we leave this place today. Mr. Pratt.
Well, as a matter of fact, I do not intend to spend too much time on that topic. The issues are very clear. There are issues of legality that are very, very important, and I do hope that we address our minds to those issues. The Bank of Ghana has finally set up a new bank or brought the collapsing banks together under the new name, the Consolidated Bank of Ghana. What's the legal basis of that? On a careful reading of the Constitution, nobody, no institution has a right to set up a company which is funded by the government of Ghana without an act of parliament. What the Bank of Ghana has done, does it amount to setting up a company into which Ghanaian taxpayers' money will be used or will be paid? Now, if that is what the Bank of Ghana has done, then it's a complete illegality and a nullity. Not being a lawyer, I would only suggest that this matter is investigated further, that people focus attention on this matter. Of course, Mr. David Annan, who is a lawyer, has spoken extensively about other legal aspects and so on. I think that it's important to interrogate all of these matters. The other thing which is important is that the Bank of Ghana itself cannot claim innocence when it comes to the things that led to the collapse of the bank. Indeed, the Bank of Ghana itself has issued a statement indicating that in some cases the licenses were obtained under fraud, you know. Now, if that is the case, the question to ask is, to what extent did the Bank of Ghana itself diligently work on those applications? What are the mechanism in the bank to ensure that fraud is not perpetrated against the people of Ghana? And so that's another dimension that we need to look at. In the final analysis, I like to say that given everything that has gone wrong, or everything that has been said about the banks and so on, I cannot believe that these are the only 5 banks that have gone under or are going under. And it's important for us to act with dispatch. It seems to me that maybe 1, 2, 3 more banks are likely to collapse. Now, the other thing that is so very critical, so important to me is, now that the local banks are collapsing in these numbers, and we have reason to suspect that more banks will collapse and so on, are we satisfied with the situation in which the banking sector is now or would be dominated by foreign banks? Are we satisfied with that situation? How does that square with the promise of breaking out of the Goggisberg economy and so on? How does that square with that promise? You know. So these are some of the issues that I would like to raise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pat, for
why are you so happy,
your final comments this morning on the show. I will read the final text messages. This one from D'Souza Wogbeyi says, my regards to all your panelists. Dr. Debianan is superb on the show. Try bringing him on the show frequently, especially when there are legal aspects of topics to be discussed. And let me check, there was a final one. Elikem Kotoko says, let us pray our president doesn't wake up one day to sign the divorce papers for Mother Rebecca.
There's one more matter that I like to raise under what did you say? Optional comments.
Let me read the message from Elikem Kotoko says, let us pray our president doesn't wake up one day to sign the divorce papers for Madame Rebecca, only to come back and say he was misled. God bless our homeland, Ghana. Okay. Let me get this one on Messenger and share that with our listeners as well. This one from King Farouk says, generational thinkers killing our generation with their thinking. 610 million. The pulpit needs deliverance. That's from King Farouk from Kaswa, sending that one through. Charles Nyame from Asamankese says, in as much as we are blaming previous government, Bank of Ghana and the affected banks themselves for these collapses, We should also be candid and honest enough to tell Mr. President and his appointing authorities that they have failed us as leaders. About 8 local banks collapsed in less than 2 years, bringing in high job losses. Why? Ghana deserves better. That's your message coming through this morning on the show. There are a few others. Let me try and locate them and share them with our listeners before the show comes to an end. This one on Twitter says, thank you, Dr. David Percy, for the fantastic delivery this morning. You really have made my day. This one also says, I may say good morning to Comrade Mutala for mentioning the pastor by name. Everybody is shying away from mentioning his name. He should be mentioned and he should be told he disappointed Ghanaians. This one says, on this day of happiness and joy, we'd like to wish you a lifetime full of success and prosperity, because a person as amazing as you deserves all of your dreams and aspirations to come true. Happy birthday. Okay, that's from Cephas and the entire Okujeto family to you, Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa. Oh, so Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa, today's your birthday. Happy birthday to you, sir. And I wish you God's blessings. This one says, please kindly tell the NDC members in Ablekuma West that the fundraising program will be coming on today at 1 p.m. at the Margaret Mary Church Auditorium. So Ablekuma West members, this one is to tell you that you have a fundraising for your programs in the constituency, and that's from Kezia sending that one through. Those are, I believe, the text messages I have with me this morning, and we have just 9 minutes to check out of here. Dr. Bessie, I believe you wanted to make a point. No, Mr. Price, you wanted to make a point before I come to Dr. Bessie.
Well, there is something which is exceedingly troubling. I mean, this week, we've come by some information which indicates that buildings from the current passport office all the way to the Ridge Circle are to be pulled down to make room for the construction of the National Cathedral. And we've checked and rechecked. We are told, for example, that the public officials, civil servants who live in the area have already been given notice to move out. If a Court of Appeal judges also live there, and they've been served with notice to move out and so on. And this whole thing is so shocking, it's unbelievable. It is shocking because some of the buildings there are only 5 years old. There's one building, one-story building, which is just being roofed. And there's another which is nearing completion. You understand? Now, there's an enclave, a gated property there, which is also going to be affected, which is where we house Court of Appeal judges and so on. Now, I'm just wondering, who decided to do this? Why? There is so much land in Ghana, Accra, everywhere, for the construction of the cathedral. Why do you have to pull down already constructed buildings to build the National Cathedral? And we're talking about millions of cities that are going to get waste. You understand? You're going to pull down all these buildings all the way from the passport office to the Ridge Roundabout. And the cost involved. Why? Why can't we save these buildings and build the cathedral on a virgin land? It's so incredible, it's unbelievable. Who took this decision?
That's been the decision of the president.
Why do you always do that, Percy?
It is his pet idea.
Yeah. So what? So it's the president who decided that they should pull down all the buildings to make room?
Who else can be that crazy to do this kind of thing?
Percy, if you want to say your things, say them yourself.
I will.
Don't try and draw me inside.
Oh no, I'm not drawing you. I'm just no.
But it is completely unbelievable. And I think it is important that attention is drawn to what is about to happen.
Yeah.
Because I've seen letters.
Yeah.
I've seen letters, official letters, notifying the residents to move out so that they can pull down these buildings to build a national cathedral. I think it's a completely crazy idea which should not be tolerated at all.
Yes, Mr. Host, I thank Kwesi for this piece of information. I mean, who can be crazy enough in the exercise of power to even dream of this? This is the president's pet idea. Nobody has a pay grade to come with an idea this crazy. Nobody. Okay? But then it's consistent with other things that have happened. For this very week, there was something on the news about the clearing of buildings around the Ochinyine's palace. They're talking about 500 houses. I think it was on your show, right? Yes. Okay. Then there was the small matter of the clearing of the hawkers from near his residence. It was completely unnecessary because we have the residence for the president in is it the Golden Stool House or the Jubilee House or whatever. Okay. But hey, nobody has a pay grade to come up with ideas this crazy, apart from the president. So I can understand my friend's caution, but I am not in his trade. I am not in his position, so I can speak clearly on these matters. But there was a comment that came in linked to this crazy notion of a national cathedral, which is this thing. There's an unhealthy alliance between an executive and a political system that is kleptocratic and the miracle business in church. Remember somebody sent in text about where wealth is created. Is it value of wealth? Yes. Okay. Now, the business of politics is the business of dealing with our material challenges. Jobs, housing, education, health, food, clothing, shelter. Okay? That's why we have politics. But the politicians are happy not to deliver. For which reason, working people have to turn to various charlatans promising miracles. This very Sunday, many churches will be full with people looking for miracles. And the current business model is heaven on earth. You keep your pastor happy and you wait in turn for your miracle. If your miracle is taking too long to happen, maybe you're not giving enough in tithes and offerings to your pastor. So, the material issues for which politicians are elected, for which parties exist, are left unattended, and people are left seeking miracles from crooks and fraudsters. And over this past week, I had, was it the boss of the Internal Revenue talking about churches paying taxes, etc.
Yeah.
Yes. I wonder how that can be a matter of controversy. Because I almost thought I got the goings on of a controversy even on your station. The churches are businesses offering religious services, right? They're almost in the same league as those in the entertainment industry, the sports industry. Okay, they get income from tithes and offerings and impositions and levies on their members, which they are free to invest in other areas for profit. So how can it even be a matter of controversy? Why should it even come to a public conversation, debate about whether they should be taxed or not?
Okay, Doc, let me pick a comment.
No, but this is a matter that maybe we have to spend some time over, okay? Because
except that now we don't have that time to spend.
Okay, Sean, mine is just briefly. Mine is just to talk about the NDC, because this other matters, and my concern is the kind of politicking and campaigning that particularly those of us young ones are engaged in the support of our preferred candidates for the flag bearership of the NDC. I think that we need to be very careful, and we must be learned. And that is why I always say here, I always quote Cesaro, that if you fail to know what happened before you were born, then you remain always a child. There is nothing wrong with me having my preferred candidate. But if you don't take care, we will attack each other. The candidates will all get bruised before we go for the elections. And whoever emerges as our flag bearer, it will be a very difficult task to be able to market such a candidate. I think that we need to be very careful.
Except that some of the statements which are being issued by non-existent organizations.
That is the point.
All of that is part of the equation.
Yes, and we can never be sure where those statements are coming from.
So that is why I'm saying that
they can be coming from your opponents.
Yes, or coming from you. I'm just saying that if we so love the party, we need to be very careful. Everybody in NDC has the right to contest. Everybody. And I have maintained ever since we lost the elections that, look, you cannot say that someone should not run again. And you can't also say that they should impose a candidate on the NDC. The decision to determine who leads the NDC should be the delegates. And at the end of the day, the delegates are not a bunch of idiots. They also know what is good for the NDC. We need to be very careful. I monitor the kinds of attack and counter-attacks on social media, and for me, that is where the worry is. Because you do this, whoever emerges as a winner, there's bound to be one person who will be elected. Would we be preferring a candidate who would be elected, and would be self-inflicted, internal inflicted, to the extent that we would find it extremely difficult to market such a candidate? We are dealing with a political party that is in government that is completely in a mess. I mean, nothing is going well for them. This country needs a salvage. This country needs someone who would salvage the people of this country. Institution upon institution, even those who were hoodwinked, who were deceived into believing that President Nana had the miracle one, have come to realize that he is the most corrupt leader ever in the history of this country. He has appointed the most corrupt appointees ever in the history of this country. And he has set up a so-called special prosecutor who doesn't have any credibility anyway, because the same special prosecutor who made a lot of allegations of corruption sat before a committee and said that he was lying, he didn't have any evidence. Yet people are indeed disregarding all those things, and what we are engaged in is to attack our kind day in, day out. I really don't think that it argues well for this party, because once you attack, the other person will also not sit by, he will also attack, and I don't think that we can be on that. I have my preferred candidate. I won't be hypocritical about it, but I will never suggest that my candidate should be imposed on the people. But who dare you also say that the candidate I support should not contest because you feel ABCD? Every single leader in this country, particularly with the NDC, we have produced 3 leaders: former President Rawlings, former President Mills of blessed memory, and President Mahama. These are the leaders we have produced since the 1992 Constitution. And I don't think that they were all loved by everybody. There were people President Rawlings didn't appoint who were bitter. It's understandable. There were people he appointed who indeed loved him. There were people Prof. Mills didn't appoint who were bitter, which is understandable. There were people he appointed who would love him. There were people President Muhammad didn't appoint who are bitter. And there were people who appointed who loved him. I listened to a narrative that those who are asking that President Mahama should rerun are people who benefited from his administration. For me, I see it to be arrogance. And those also who support President Mahama should never, under any circumstance, create the impression as if no other person should contest him. I don't think that should be our position as a party that is democratic and believes in the democratic ideas. And particularly those of us young ones, we need to be very careful in the kind of pronouncement and write-up, some of which are concocted lies. I think we are hurting the party there more.
Thank you, Comrade, for your final comment. Dr. Percy, is that 10 seconds?
30 seconds.
Okay.
I think it'll be generous. You know, I feel like saying this to my friend Comrade Murtala and to my friends in the NDC, that the more I think about it and see what is going on, the more it reflects what the so-called founder said, that they've come to look so much like the MPP. Okay. And you make the point about what is happening, Kwesi alluded to it in social media, where people can set up for the purpose of this thing, attacking you, setting up fake accounts. But why? It's more, all is fair. Now, what you have is a beauty contest. This is what has gone on in a more on a more elephantine version already in the MPP with the opulence, okay, and the extravagance. Now, at this stage, what I got to know about the NDC at its foundation, you'll be talking about the plans that should go into your platform. And the business of electing or selecting your candidate would have come about through persons who are leaders of your party in this business. Then it will not be as divisive as you're having. But all that you have is a beauty contest. So if it's a beauty contest, why? How do you put yourself forward? By saying that, look, this guy is ugly. What else do you have?
All right.
But seriously, look, I've been carefully looking at what is happening.
Yeah.
And it is clear that people are setting up, as you say, fake accounts on Facebook and so on, and just pouring fuel, into the inferno. Yeah. The inferno, to a very large extent, is artificial.
Yeah, but I'm saying that. What I was
saying, can I finish?
No,
can I finish? So it's important to recognize that.
Yes. No, the point I'm...
You understand?
Crazy.
Why? There are many hands creating the impression that there are so many candidates and so on. Yeah. And in fact, to a very large extent, from what I know, forces external to the NDC are involved in creating this impression. And you should not fall for it. And when I see what is happening, I laugh.
Yes.
People who have become ministers before, so they can't see what is happening. They are falling for it. I mean, all you have to do is to nurture their ego a little, and then they jump up running about, claiming to be presidential candidates and so on. I mean, incredible. What are they looking for? You heard the comments that Franklin Kudo made. Franklin Kudo. About all of these numerous candidates and what their true intentions may be and so on. They should stop this childishness. Right. Look, this country has serious problems to solve. The people of this country, I don't think our interest is in some of these characters who are emerging and so on. We've seen them before. This country wants to solve problems. And Dr. Percy is absolutely right. The discussion should focus on how to solve the numerous problems that confront us. You understand? Go to the market today. Prices of consumer goods, some of them have risen by 150% in 2 years and so on. Let's discuss these matters and so on. And you come and say, well, you are the best. Best for what? There are 28 million people in Ghana, and it is arrogance. Some of the process that people are adopting is sheer arrogance. Why? Is anybody more qualified or better qualified than Dr. Percy? Or Tutu Poku or any of those people and so on? No, it's a fact. Look, what's the qualification for president? 14 years? must be able to become a member of parliament and so on. The number of people who qualify to be president in this country are in the millions. So when you have a handful of people behaving as if they are God sent and so on, it's very annoying. Very annoying. Who are they? Give us a break, my friends.
Yeah, the point I was making very quickly is not so much about the individuals, but about the character of the party. And I'm making the point that this is a symptom rather than a cause. Okay? Because of the kind of party that you have shaped yourself to be. This is what you must expect to happen on a bigger and worse scale as you go forward. I'm saying that if you have shaped yourself differently from what I thought the NDC was about at its beginnings, you'll be at this stage talking about your policy plans. What to do about public housing.
Doc, I see the
What to
guys.
do about... I'm sure they'll give me a second, half a second.
Producer, have not said that they are giving me.
Producer, you're standing right beside me.
Well, we have a government that has become accustomed to creating, looting, and sharing. So I'm going to say I'm going to create and share. So for all time, I'm saying that what any serious party confronted with our problem should be doing at this stage is developing policy plans. What to do on education. What to do on how... It is the leaders in that business who come forward through the process of... And they'll be known to the party. So you don't even have to go outside the bounds of a party to the point where you have to put posters. Because you'll be known inside the party.
All right, Doc, we would have to end the program.
But of course, then this has become
chance.
a completely different party from what it set out to be.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me say hi to all the workers and the attendants at the...
Thank you to the sports people for allowing me to steal it.
They are grateful as well for your final submission. Hello to all the workers and attendants at the Mampobi Girl Filling Station. I understand you've been listening all morning and you've opened your speakers very loud for everybody passing by to hear us. Good morning to you all at that filling station. This one, final one from Kwame Tebiri Buahin says, Sami, please tell Kwesipa that once again our incorruptible president is being misled to pull down property to make way for yet another white elephant. Given the traffic flow in that area and the fact that a major arterial, that is the Liberation Road, is in that area, we can all imagine the bedlam that will befall all those who use that important arterial. Welcome to Madness. That was sent through. That's the end of the show for this morning. My name is Sambolishan. I've been your host, and we will be here, God willing, next week, Saturday.